Chapter 1725. On the island of Myriad, there was a small hall about 500 kilometers away from the Myriad Trade Union. This was the place where the Yu Yao of the various spiritual islands were registered. Lu Yi and Luan Xiao had been brought here by Tang Jun before. As the island masters of the three-world island, the three of them had to leave some information here. Therefore, they were familiar with the place this time. The hall was not very lively, but there were still some Yu Yao entering and exiting. The number of Yu Yao stationed on each spiritual island was not fixed. Many spiritual islands would make adjustments at certain times. Therefore, after each adjustment, they would have to make a trip here. For example, if a peak Yu Yao of a spiritual island wanted to go into seclusion to break through to the Sunshine Realm, the force would definitely send another Yu Yao to take his place and guard their spiritual island. Or if a new Yu Yao was born and wanted to cultivate on a spiritual island, they would also have to make a trip here. Lu Yi led He Baichuan and Ma Shangxi into the main hall. He turned around and looked around before heading in a certain direction. There was a table there, and a cultivator was sitting behind it. He was holding a musical talisman and seemed to be chatting with someone. From time to time, he would let out a silly chuckle. There were several similar tables scattered around the hall. Since the other places were occupied, Lu Yi could only choose this one. Lu Yi came to the table, but the other party did not notice. He was engrossed in his conversation. It was only when Lu Yi raised his hand and knocked on the table that the star constellation turned around. He blinked and asked, "What's the matter?" This constellation didn't have the restraint and reverence that ordinary cultivators would have when facing Yu Yao. Since he was able to work here, he must be from a local galaxy. Moreover, Yu Yao was the one who frequented this place. It could be said that he had seen Yu Yao countless times, so he naturally had the ability to remain calm when facing her. "Register for Yu Yao's replacement," Lu Yi said concisely. This kind of registration was not uncommon. The star constellation naturally understood. He nodded and temporarily retracted his musical note. Then he asked, "Who wants to do the replacement?" Lu Yi pointed at Ma Shangxi and He Baichuan beside him. He did not need to register for himself. The star constellation immediately threw over 2 blank jade slips. Origin, name, force, and who you want to replace. Please record in detail. Lu Yi gave 2 blank jade strips to Ma Shangxi and He Baichuan, and the two of them immediately got busy. These pieces of information were very simple, and no one had gone to investigate anything. It was even more impossible to find any results. After a short while, Lu Yi handed over 2 jade slips to Xing Su. Xing Su took them and checked them. His eyes flashed as he asked, "Is the person who was replaced dead?" "He's still alive." "Is he here?" Lu Yi blinked. The other party immediately threw the jade slip back. He shook his head and said, "That won't do. Since the people who were replaced are still alive, you have to bring them together. Only when both sides are present can this matter be settled." "Is there such a rule?" Lu Yi was stunned. Why hadn't Tang Jun mentioned it before? Either that or the old man himself didn't know. After all, he hadn't done these things before. The constellation laughed and lowered her head, ignoring Lu Yi. Lu Yi stood where he was and thought for a moment. Then he secretly took out a storage ring and handed it over. He said in a low voice, "Little brother, please help me." Xing Su looked up at Lu Yi and shook her head. "It's not that I don't want to help. It's just that the rules cannot be broken. If the person who was replaced isn't present, how would I know if you are in cahoots? The matter of replacing Yu Yao is very strict. If just anyone could replace someone else, wouldn't it be a mess? What if you have a grudge against the three-world island and are here to cause trouble? Since I'm sitting here, I have to be responsible for the various spiritual islands." These words made sense. Lu Yi could tell that the other party wasn't trying to shirk responsibility or ask for any benefits. This was indeed the case. If the three of them really had a grudge against the three-world island, they couldn't do anything without the replacement Yu Yao present. However, on second thought, Lu Yi said, "I am the 3rd island master of the three-world island. There are records here. I can vouch for you. Can't you do that?" "Rules are rules." The other party shook her head. Lu Yi had no choice but to lead He Baichuan and Ma Shangxi out. Standing at the door, he looked around. There was a tea house not far away. Lu Yi said, "Let's go up and have some tea." He Baichuan and Ma Shangxi naturally had no objections. They followed Lu Yi into the tea house. They went up to the second floor and found a seat by the window. Only then did Lu Yi send a message, asking Cheng Xian to bring Tang Jun here. He decided to replace Cheng Xian with the two merfolk elders. As they waited, they chatted. He Baichuan looked around. This was his first time in the Wanxiang Sea. This could be said to be the most prosperous place in the Wanxiang Sea. Naturally, he looked around with great interest. If only our three-world island could have such a scene. He looked around and thought to himself. Lu Yi took a sip of tea and said, "It's difficult." In terms of scale, the three-world island was about the same as the Wanxiang Island. Now that it had the minor constellation hall, it was destined to become a top-tier spiritual island in the future. In terms of the spiritual island's resources, Lu Yi believed that the three-world island would not be inferior to the Wanxiang Island in the future. However, it would not be so easy to achieve the same level of prosperity as the Wanxiang Island. The Wanxiang Island was not the only top-tier spiritual island in the entire Wanxiang Sea. However, the prosperity of the Wanxiang Island was unmatched by any other spiritual island. Because it belonged to a local faction, it had natural credibility and deterrence. This was an advantage that no other spiritual island could compare to. Any cultivator who came to the Wanxiang Sea for the first time would want to visit the Wanxiang Island. It would be even better if we could conquer the Wanxiang Sea. He Baichuan's thoughts grew bigger and bigger. Lu Yi could not help but laugh. Based on the way the local star system currently managed the Wanxiang Sea, wanting to occupy it was simply a pipe dream. They would not allow too much sunlight to be active here. Without enough sunlight, it would be impossible to conquer the Wanxiang Sea. Back then, Luo Xie had only stayed for a few days when he came here. Furthermore, there were many factions in the Wanxiang Sea. Many major factions had extended their influence here and made a fortune on the Wanxiang Sea. Therefore, no matter who wanted to conquer the Wanxiang Sea, they would have to face more than one local star system. The factions that had made a fortune on the Wanxiang Sea would not allow such a thing to happen. They did not want too much chaos on the Wanxiang Sea. He Baichuan was looking around excitedly when he suddenly turned his head and looked at Lu Yi with a serious expression. "What's wrong?" Lu Yi was stunned by his look. He Baichuan did not speak. He only transmitted his voice, "Don't look outside. I saw Yu Yao who stopped me and senior sister Luan earlier." Lu Ye's raised teacup froze. He raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure?" "Of course I can recognize her since we've only fought for a short while. Moreover, her cultivation matches." He Baichuan nodded. The reason why he told Lu Yi not to look outside was that he was afraid of being detected. "Where is she?" Lu Yi slowly put down his teacup. This was really a case of traveling far and wide in search of something, only to find it by chance. He had just decided to reveal the three-realm island strength during the internal meeting. The goal of this display was to find the faction that had ambushed Tang Jun earlier on. At first, there was no clue about this matter. Lu Yi and the others did not know Yu Yao at all. Who knew which spirit island they came from? Once they hid on a spirit island, there was no way for them to take revenge. Tang Jun was investigating this matter, but it would not be easy for him to get any results. Unexpectedly, enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. He Baichuan actually saw one of those people here. "That person has entered the registration area," He Baichuan said. "He has another Yu Yao with him." Lu Yi immediately reacted. "In the previous battle, I killed one of their mid-stage Yu Yao. This person is here to fill the vacancy." This was really a coincidence. However, when he thought about it carefully, it was not too coincidental. Now that Yu Yao was dead, there was a vacancy. Indeed, they had to come here to register and fill the vacancy. However, the few of them were just sitting here drinking tea and chatting. He Baichuan kept looking around, and that was how he discovered the other party. "Did he notice you?" Lu Yi asked. He Baichuan shook his head. "No. I shifted my gaze the moment I saw him." "Very good." Lu Yi pondered for a moment, then said, "Tell Ma Shangxi about that person's appearance." He then looked at Ma Shangxi. "When that person comes out, Follow him secretly. Find out which spirit island is behind him. Now that the enemy was out in the open and they were in the dark, the opportunity was great. There were two choices before Lu Yi. One was to give them a taste of their own medicine. They would ambush old Tang the same way they had ambushed him. However, after thinking about it, Lu Yi did not choose to do so. Before they could confirm their next course of action, it would not be easy to choose a place to ambush them. It would not be convenient for them to ambush them. If they wanted to attack, they could only follow up and attack. Once the other party noticed, they would definitely escape. By then, they might not be able to kill the other party. Instead, they would alert the other party. Furthermore, if they wanted to show the three-world island's strength to the outside world, they could not rely on this method alone. They had to do something big. For example, starting a battle for spirit islands. Hence, Lu Yi decided to find out the other party's background first. Previously, their biggest problem was that they did not know who the enemy was. Now that they had coincidentally bumped into him, they could not let go of this godsend opportunity. Ma Shangxi received the order and immediately left the tea house. Soon his aura disappeared. This fellow had been in the Wanxiang Sea for a long time. As a member of the blood clan, he could live like a fish in water in the Wanxiang Sea. Not only did he rely on his own abilities, but his disguise was also top-notch. The other party had seen He Baichuan, but not Ma Shangxi. It was naturally the best choice for him to follow them. After a while, Lu Yi sent a message to Cheng Xan, who was rushing over. He asked her to bring Tang Jun to a place and wait for him. After receiving her reply, he then led He Baichuan out of the tea house and flew out of the Wanxiang Island. The other party had already left the Wanxiang Island 2 months ago. Ma Shangxi was tailing them. With his guidance, Lu Yi would not go in the wrong direction. Chapter 1726. Half a day later, Lu Yi brought He Baichuan and Ma Shangxi to a deserted island. This deserted island was very small, about 2 to 3 acres in size. Therefore, even the weakest forces would not be interested in such a deserted island. Lu Yi rushed to this place and turned his head to take a look. He did not see Ma Shangxi. However, he quickly turned his head to look in a certain direction. In the crevices of the rocks, blood was flowing out. Very quickly, it formed a human shape and revealed Ma Shangxi's figure. Where? Lu Yi looked at him and asked. Ma Shangxi shook his head and said, I am not sure where exactly. When I reached this place, the trail was cut off. Tracking Tu Yu Yao was not an easy task, especially when they were on the Vientiane Sea. There were not many places to hide. This was a test of the tracker's patience and skills. Although Ma Shangxi could use some secret techniques to hide his body and aura, he did not dare to get too close. As a result, when he reached this place, the other party's aura suddenly disappeared. However, this did not mean that Ma Shangxi's tracking had failed. The spiritual island that they are on should be nearby. The trail was cut off because they entered their own spiritual island and were isolated by a formation. Lu Yi nodded and immediately took out his star map to check. After some exploration, he confirmed 2 locations. These 2 places were both spiritual islands. On the star map, one was a middle-grade spiritual island and the other was a high-grade spiritual island. These 2 spiritual islands were the most suspicious. If he was not wrong, the enemy should be from one of these 2 spiritual islands. After all, from their previous interactions, a force that could mobilize 5 Yu Yao at once would not be weak. As for how strong it was hard to say. The forces behind these 2 spiritual islands were very suitable. Choosing one of the 2 seemed simple, but it was actually very troublesome. Unless they sent people to keep watch near these 2 spiritual islands for a long time. However, if they did so, it would definitely raise the alarm of others. The various spiritual islands were very strict in their security and management of their surroundings. After thinking about it, Lu Yi sent a message to Tang Jun. Given the current situation, he could only ask Tang Jun to think of a way to find out what was going on. If he could find out what was going on, that would be for the best. If he couldn't, he could only send someone to keep watch. That was the last option. Tang Jun quickly replied, I took a look at the star map. Your location isn't far from 4 Corners Island. You should know something about the 4 Corners star system. Why don't you ask them? Lu Ye's eyes lit up. This was a pleasant surprise. He quickly checked the star map to find the location of Square Island, but no matter how hard he searched, there was no indication of Square Island on the star map. Only then did he remember that he had bought this star chart a long time ago. When he bought this star chart, the cultivators from the Four Directions star systems had yet to arrive. Square Island was obviously the name of a spiritual island that the cultivators from the Square Galaxy had taken over. Lu Yi had the musical imprint of a few Yu Yao from the Four Corners star system. Previously, the Four Corners star system even had the intention of joining forces with the Three Worlds Island. This alliance was actually a form of protection. The Four Corners star system was indebted to Lu Yi. Before they came, Ri Zhao from the various families had instructed them to take care of Lu Yi when they arrived at the Wanxiang star system. In terms of strength, the Four Corners star system was much stronger than the Three Worlds Island. They wanted to help the Three Worlds Island conquer a middle-grade spiritual island. However, Lu Yi declined. With the minor constellation hall, the Three Worlds Island would be able to rise up sooner or later. There was no need for them to conquer other spiritual islands. Moreover, the Three Worlds Island's cultivators were not strong enough at that time. Lu Yi did not want to rashly get involved in the Four Corners star system's operations. He did not want to bring trouble to himself. The Four Corners star system obviously knew this. Hence, they did not take the initiative to contact the Three Worlds Island after that. This was not because they had grown distant, but because they realized that if they were too close to the Three Worlds Island, they might bring trouble to the Three Worlds Island. Hence, when Lu Yi contacted them, the Yu Yao from the Four Corners star system were very happy. Lu Yi did not go directly to the Three Worlds Island. Instead, he waited on the deserted island. After a while, someone came. When they saw each other, the person greeted him warmly, "Taoist Lu." "Taoist Zhou." Lu Yi cupped his fists. "Sorry to trouble you." The person who came was none other than Zhou Chuang from the Black North Star system. He was a late-stage Yu Yao. In fact, he was not the only late-stage Yu Yao. The Yu Yao from the Four Corners star system were all at the same cultivation level. In the Four Corners star system, Lu Yi interacted with Apeiron the most. As he had passed by Apeiron twice, he had interacted with many of Apeiron's Yu Yao. However, he was most emotionally biased towards the Black North Star. This was because when he was in the Unbounded Realm, Black North Star's Sunshine and Qin Yi visited him at night. She personally thanked Lu Yi and gave him a token. With this token, Lu Yi could unconditionally mobilize all forces in the Black North Star system in the Wanxiang Sea. Although the other three star systems Sunshine did not treat Lu Yi badly, they were not as direct as Qin. After all, Lu Yi had killed Bai Jin. It could be said that he had avenged Qin Yi's dead Dao partner. Zhou Chuang chuckled. "You're too kind, Taoist Lu. Before we came, the Realm Lord had instructed us to cooperate fully with you if you need anything." As he spoke, he was stunned. He looked Lu Yi up and down and said in astonishment, "Taoist, you're the Yu Yao?" "I advanced by luck." Lu Yi nodded. "Congratulations, congratulations." Zhou Chuang congratulated him. Previously, Lu Yi was only a star constellation. He was one level lower than a Yu Yao. Now, they were both Yu Yao. Although Lu Ye's cultivation level was slightly lower, there was no difference in terms of cultivation level. After chatting for a while, Zhou Chuang said, "Taoist, do you have any instructions for me?" "You flatter me. I just want to ask you about two people." As Lu Yi spoke, he gave Ma Shangxi a look. Lu Yi originally wanted Ma Shangxi to describe the appearances of the two people he had been tracking. However, he did not expect this guy to take out an image recording stone and hand it to Zhou Chuang. When he had been tracking the enemies, he had actually left behind some images. He had done a good job. Images were undoubtedly more accurate than verbal descriptions. Even if the images in Ma Shangxi's image recording stone weren't very clear, he didn't dare to get too close to Yu Yao. Moreover, recording Yu Yao's images was actually very risky. Zhou Chuang took the image recording stone and examined it carefully. Then he frowned and said, "According to my judgment, the taller person should be Baiyue Island's Yu Huan." "Are you sure?" Lu Yi asked. Zhou Chuang said, "I'm 70% sure. If there are other images to prove it, it should be clearer." Lu Yi was basically certain that Baiyue Island was the one behind the sneak attack on Tangjun. This was because he had determined from the star map that the high-grade spiritual island was Baiyue Island. Lu Yi had originally thought that it was the middle-grade spiritual island that was behind this. Because they were only a middle-grade spiritual island, they had taken a fancy to a high-grade spiritual island like Three Realm Island and wanted to move to a better base. Unexpectedly, it was Baiyue Island. This was very strange. Since they had already occupied a high-grade spiritual island, why were they interested in Three Realm Island? Were they not afraid that they would eat too much? Although it was not a rule on the surface, basically, other than those worlds with a strong foundation who could occupy a spiritual island alone, most forces acted in groups of galaxies. It was very rare for a galaxy to occupy two spiritual islands at the same time. This involved the problem of dividing the resources of the Wanxiang Sea. Many things were tacitly understood. Zhou Chuang looked at Lu Yi in confusion. "My friend, what grudges do you have with Baiyue Island?" Zhou Chuang and the others knew that the Three Realm Island had been promoted to a high-class spirit island, and they were envious. After all, not everyone could experience something like being reborn on a deserted island. The cultivators of the Three Realm had effortlessly obtained a high-class spirit island as their base. Three Realm Island was already a high-grade spiritual island. Therefore, Zhou Chuang felt that Lu Yi did not want to attack Baiyue Island. With the foundation of the cultivators of the Three Realm, they would not be able to defend it. If that was the case, then there must be some grudges between them. There are some conflicts. Our people were ambushed by them previously. Lu Yi did not hide it because it was not a big deal. This kind of thing happened frequently on the Wanxiang Sea. Take Zhou Chuang for example. It was not strange for him to be ambushed when he went out. During this period, the Four-Direction Galaxy had not been idle. They had caused a lot of trouble. They want to attack you? Zhou Chuang immediately reacted. Although they did not contact Three Realm Island, they knew about the situation there. The cultivators of the Three Realm had not caused any trouble recently. Since they came to provoke them, it was obvious that they had set their sights on Three Realm Island. That should be the case. Lu Yi nodded. That's why I have to make the first move. Zhou Chuang immediately said, "Count Beixian in." He did not say Four-Direction Galaxy because he could not represent it. He could only represent Beishuan's part. Lu Yi smiled. "Thank you for your kindness. If Three Realm Island wants to establish itself, they have to do it themselves. They can't rely on external help. Moreover, this matter involves Rizhao." When Zhou Chuang heard this, he roughly understood what was going on. Although he had arrived at the Wanxiang Sea later than Lu Yi, he knew a lot of things about the Wanxiang Sea better than Lu Yi. For example, the matter of visiting a mountain, because the Four-Way Galaxy had been doing the same thing recently. "Which Rizhao?" Zhou Chuang asked. "Yuan Du." "Him." Zhou Chuang immediately looked angry. "We've been in contact with his people before. This Rizhao is insatiably greedy." Lu Yi asked curiously, "You've been in contact with him for invading a mountain too?" Zhou Chuang sighed. "At first, we thought things were too simple. We thought that with Four-Direction Galaxy's resources, it would not be a problem to take down a high-class spiritual island. However, when we started preparing, we realized that the Wanxiang Sea's waters were deeper than we thought. After Four-Direction Galaxy took over Four-Direction Island, they tried to attack a high-class spiritual island. On the surface, they had a slight advantage. After all, they had a lot of constellations. However, when they started fighting, Four-Direction Island was ambushed by another group of forces. In a panic, they hurriedly withdrew their troops to protect Four Corner Island. It was only later that they found out that the force they attacked and the second force that ambushed them were both under the same sunshine. That was why they had such a close relationship and cooperation. Chapter 1727. After this lesson, Foursquare Galaxy had no choice but to remain patient and continue to occupy Foursquare Island. At the same time, they were also trying to get in touch with Nicho on the island of Versatility. Unfortunately, they had only been here for a short period of time and their connections were not even as good as Old Soup's. Hence, up until now, the Four Corners Galaxy had only occupied a mid-level spiritual island. If they had fewer cultivators, the Four Corners Island would have been able to accommodate them. However, the Four Corners Galaxy had transferred too many constellations over. Now that they were all squeezed onto the Four Corners Island, it was a little crowded. The efficiency of the cultivators' cultivation was greatly affected. Taoist Lu, if you want to attack Baiyue Island, the first thing you need to do is strengthen the island's defense. Zhou Chuang said this because he had learned from the previous incident. He could imagine that once Baiyue Island was attacked by Three World Island, they would definitely contact their allies to launch a sneak attack on Three World Island and force them to retreat. If the Three World Island wasn't prepared, they would definitely come back to help after learning that their island was under attack. At that time, the Baiyue Island would be able to chase after them. Even their allies would give up on the Three World Island and block the Three World Island's cultivators. At that time, they would be surrounded by wolves and tigers. The situation wouldn't be good. Four-Way Galaxy had suffered such a loss before, so Zhou Chuang specifically reminded Lu Yi. Lu Yi nodded and showed a thoughtful expression. It seemed that Four-Way Galaxy had underestimated the situation in Wanxiang Sea. Wasn't he the same? There were some things that could not be understood without a deeper understanding. In the end, he didn't care about anything on Peerless Island. Plus, Chu Shen's identity saved him a lot of trouble. Those factions that came to Wanxiang Sea to develop, except for the top ones, all of them spent a lot of money and manpower to gain a foothold in Wanxiang Sea. It was impossible for Jade Conch to occupy the Three World Island in peace. The Baiyue family was definitely not the only one who had their eyes on the Three World Island. Perhaps there were even more hidden forces. Lu Yi did not plan to give up on attacking Baiyue Island. The current situation was very clear. If the Three World Island wanted to gain a foothold on the Vientiane Sea, they had to display their strength. Otherwise, they would be in an awkward situation like before. They even took the initiative to visit Riri, but Riri was too lazy to respond. In Riri's opinion, the Three World Islands Foundation was too weak to last long. Moreover, this matter had to be done secretly. Otherwise, once the news was leaked and Baiyue was prepared, there would be many twists and turns. Fortunately, Baiyue Island didn't know that Lu Yi had tracked them here, which was an advantage. After that, Lu Yi chatted with Zhou Chuang for a long time and inquired about the situation at Baiyue Island before leaving with Ma Shangxi and He Baichuan. When they returned to the Island of Versatility, Qing Xan and Old Tang had already been waiting for them for a long time. The few of them went to the Grand Hall together. With Lu and Ye's status as the three island masters and Qing Xian and Old Tang's arrival, the matter of Yu Yao's replacement was quickly settled. With this, the 5 Yu Yao in charge of the Three World Island were confirmed. Of course, this did not mean that Qing Xian and Tang Jun could not stay on the Three World Island. In fact, they could still stay here. However, if the Three World Island encountered a battle, they would not be able to contribute due to the rules. Even if the Three World Island was about to be destroyed, they could only watch. When they returned to the Three World Island, Lu Yi immediately summoned the Yu Yao for a meeting. In the meeting hall, the 7 Yu Yao were gathered. Lu Yi reported the information he had received in detail. After listening, Luan Xiao frowned and said, "Now, we can basically confirm that it was Baiyue Island who attacked us, right?" "That's right." Lu Yi nodded. Baiyue Island is a high-grade spiritual island. They have the Baiyue Galaxy behind them and have occupied the Vientiane Sea for many years. In terms of foundation, we are weaker than them. It will not be easy to attack Baiyue Island. Lu Yi raised his hand and knocked on the table. He said, "The problem now is not whether it will be easy or not. If our Three World Island wants to grow stronger, we must have this battle." The merchants of the various factions were all watching. They all felt that the Three World Island's cultivators would not be able to occupy this place for long. Therefore, even though the Three World Island was a high-grade spiritual island, no one took the initiative to negotiate. If they wanted to change the situation, they had to fight. They had to show the world that the Three World Island's cultivators were strong enough to defend this place. This was related to the long-term development of the Three World Island in the future. Therefore, no matter how difficult it was, this battle was imperative. I think fellow Taoist Zhou Chuang is right. If we want to attack Baiyue Island, The first thing we need to do is strengthen our own defenses. We can't follow in Four Corner Island's footsteps. Baiwei Island has been operating on the Vientiane Sea for so long, and they have Ri Guang as their backer. They must have allies. Once we attack, the three-world island will definitely be affected. Tang Jun put his hands in his pockets with a solemn expression. He Baichuan also nodded and said, "The three-world island is our base. We can't afford to lose it." Although the three-world island and Baiwei Island were both high-grade spiritual islands, they were different in size. The three-world island was much larger and could accommodate more cultivators. Therefore, the three-world island was much more valuable than Baiwei Island. If their defenses were not strong enough, even if they managed to take down Baiwei Island, the three-world island might be taken over. The losses would outweigh the gains. Many Yu Yao spoke one after another. They all agreed with Zhou Chuang's previous suggestion. If they wanted this battle to go smoothly, they had to strengthen the three-world island's defenses. How many spirit jades do we have now? Lu Yi raised his head and looked at Luan Xiaoa. She was the first island master of the three-world island. She should be very familiar with this matter. Luan Xiaoa immediately reported a number. Lu Yi frowned. The amount of spirit jades they had was much less than he expected. This was not surprising. The three-world island only had one source of income now, and that was through trading with the mermaid clan. In this regard, the three-world island offered a very fair price. In addition, the cultivators of the three-world island needed to cultivate. Therefore, the entire three-world island did not have much spirit jades left. Take Tang Jun for example. His red talisman, which was worth 2 million spirit jades, was a huge expenditure. This expenditure was not borne by him, but by the three-world island. And this was just him alone. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for the three-world island to have a large surplus. The discussion became a little awkward. This was because even if they spent all the spirit jades they had, it would not increase the three-world island's defenses by much. At the very least, there would not be a qualitative change. If there was no qualitative change, the improvements would be meaningless. There's another problem. Luan Xiaoa spoke again. We have 1,000 lunar mansions. We can only mobilize 5 Yu Yao. How are we going to split our forces? On one hand, they had to attack Baiwei Island. On the other hand, they had to defend the three-world island. 1,000 lunar mansions and 5 Yu Yao. This might seem like a lot, but once they split their forces, they would not have that much manpower. Attacking Baiwei Island required sufficient manpower. They would need at least 3 Yu Yao. Even if they brought 700 lunar mansions, they might not be able to defeat the enemy. After all, the enemy was defending. With the protection of Baiwei Island, they had an absolute geographical advantage. On the other hand, they would only have 2 Yu Yao and 300 lunar mansions to defend the three-world island. If a strong enemy attacked, they might not be able to defend the island. In fact, in the Vientiane Sea, although the battle of spiritual islands happened from time to time, it usually happened on the lower-class and middle-class spiritual islands. It was rare to see a battle of upper-class spiritual islands as it involved too many things. Any faction that could occupy a high-grade spiritual island would not be weak. Unless there was an irresistible reason, it was basically impossible for them to start a war with another faction of the same status. The more they discussed this matter, the less likely it was to succeed. This made the Yu Yao worried. Tang Jun said, "Why don't we wait a little longer? I'll try to contact that Ri Zhao. What if he's willing to accept us?" The 3 newcomers, Ri Zhao, were all possible targets. However, Tang Jun did not want to get in touch with the Sky Flame Realm cultivator. He had almost died at the hands of the Sky Flame Realm cultivators back then. How could he shake his head and beg for mercy? There was no need to talk about Yuan Du. This sneak attack was obviously because Yuan Du's people had leaked information to the enemy. This enmity had already been formed. Thus, there was only one target left. No need. Lu Yi waved his hand. Given the current situation, it's probably a waste of time even if you go. We're nothing in front of Ri Zhao. He's from the same galaxy as Yuan Du, so he must be friends with him. Since Yuan Du is interested in the three-world island, how could he not give him face? Tang Jun sighed. He did not know what to do. Although he had connections, to put it bluntly, they were all unscrupulous people. He had gotten to know these people mainly because he had a good position in Matchless Island. Now that he no longer had the backing of Matchless Island, even if he contacted others, they would not treat him sincerely. The problem in front of everyone was a little difficult to solve. If they attacked, they might not be able to take down Baiwe Island in a short time. If they defended, they would need to divide a portion of their forces and spend a lot of spirit jades. If the battle did not go well, the cultivators of the three-world island would be stuck in a dilemma. The discussion hall fell silent. Everyone was deep in thought, thinking of a way to break out of this situation. After a long while, Lu Yi slowly opened his mouth. "I have a plan." Everyone raised their heads and looked at him. Lu Yi slowly explained his plan. Everyone's eyelids twitched as they listened. Old Tang said worriedly, "Isn't this plan too risky? If it fails, then we'll have nothing. If we don't take risks, we can't achieve anything. At present, this is the only feasible plan," Lu Yi said. Compared to the old Tang Jun, he was a young man. Young people were naturally more radical in their actions. So radical that Tang Jun could not bear it. If they followed Lu Ye's plan and failed, the consequences would be very serious. But for Lu Yi, he had his own considerations. This consideration could not be shared with others because this matter involved the minor Constellation Hall. Scan the code to download this station united with Xiaoxiang to send benefits to newcomers for a limited time to read a large number of free books. Chapter 1728. What does everyone think? In the discussion hall, Lu Yi turned to look at the others. Everyone remained silent, weighing the pros and cons of this plan. After a long while, Luan Xiao said, "We have 7 Yuyao, so let's vote by a show of hands. Those who agree with junior brother Lu's proposal, please raise your hand." As soon as she finished speaking, Tang Jun raised his hand. The group of people looked at him in astonishment. Old Tang scolded, "If it was anyone else who proposed this old man definitely wouldn't agree. But since Lu Yi has this idea, you will definitely support it. So why should I oppose him?" Old Tang was right. The 2 Yu Yao of the mermaid clan would definitely agree with Lu Ye's proposal. Ma Shangxi was even more so. Out of the 7 Yu Yao, Lu Yi had 4 on his side. Old Tang had no choice but to agree. There was no need for the others to vote. Now that the plan had been decided, it was time to discuss the specifics of the plan. The most important part of Lu Ye's proposal was how to quickly break through Baiwe Island's defenses. If they couldn't do this, then there was no need to think about the rest. However, Baiwe Island had been in operation for many years, and its defensive formations had accumulated a great deal of energy. While it wasn't indestructible, it was definitely not weak either. Attacking from the outside would definitely not work. At that time, even if everyone on Three World Island was mobilized and went all out, they might not be able to do anything to the defensive formations in a short time. After discussing for a long time, everyone felt that if they wanted to break through Baiwe Island's defensive formations, they could only attack from the inside. Ideas were thrown out one after another, and everyone discussed the possibility of success. It was not until half a day later that a vague action plan was proposed. The reason why it was a vague plan was mainly because there were too many uncertain factors in the plan, so they needed to adapt to the situation. Thus, the matter was decided. Lu Yi took out a sound talisman and sent out a message. Three World Island officially entered a state of battle readiness. 2 days later, Three World Island's defensive formations buzzed, and a large amount of fog suddenly filled the air. Before long, the entire Three World Island was shrouded in fog. Outsiders couldn't see the situation on the island from the outside. Baiwe Island. With Yu Huan as the leader, several Yu Yaos gathered together. News of the changes in Three World Island had already spread. They had planted people outside Three World Island to monitor the situation. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to intercept Luan Xiao and He Baichuan when they left. In the main hall, Yu Huan sat on the main seat. He frowned and muttered, "The Three World Island suddenly changed. They used the maze to hide the inside. I don't know what they want to do." As he spoke, he turned to look at a woman. Junior Sister Meng, you're in charge of this matter. Have you heard anything? On his left, a woman with a dignified aura shook her head and said, the people below didn't discover anything. The change in the three-world island was very sudden. Senior Marshal Brother, you know that the sea around the three-world island is vast. Although I sent people to monitor the periphery, they couldn't get too close. Yu Huan nodded slightly, knowing that Junior Sister Meng was right. Opposite Junior Sister Meng, a tall and sturdy man stroked his chin and said, in my opinion, the three-world island is just taking precautions. Our previous actions have already alerted them. It's normal for them to have such a response. Yu Huan's eyes flashed. Then is there a possibility that the three-world island has already discovered our identities? That's not likely. A young-looking Yu Yao shook her head. The cultivators from the three-world island come from a galaxy called Jade Conch. We've never heard of this galaxy before. It's obvious that it's not a big deal. When they first arrived, they were lucky enough to occupy a deserted island. Without any connections, how could they have discovered our identities? She was right. If Lu Yi and the others hadn't coincidentally bumped into Yu Huan, the three-world island would definitely still be trying to find out their identities. There were many Yu Yao on the Wanxiang Sea. Every spiritual island had a Yu Yao overseeing it. If the three-world island had really begun to investigate their identities, they would definitely have received news. After all, in terms of business operations, the Baiyue Island was much better than the three-world island. They hadn't received any news at all. This meant that the three-world island knew nothing about their situation. Yu Yao and the others discussed for a while, and they felt that the three-world island's change was a precautionary measure. After all, their people had been ambushed, and before they could confirm who had ambushed them, they had to be prepared. By using the bewildering formation to conceal the situation on the island, they had undoubtedly realized that someone was watching them from the outside. We must take down the three-world island. This isn't just a mission given to us by the higher-ups. We must avenge our dead junior brother Wang. When this matter was brought up, Yu Huan's face was filled with resentment. The other Yu Yao also had hatred in their eyes. The Yu Yao were all from the Baiyue Galaxy. They had worked together for many years, so they naturally had feelings for each other. However, in the previous battle, the three-world island hadn't suffered any losses. On the contrary, they had lost their junior brother Wang. This made Yu Huan and the others extremely furious. They secretly swore that they would kill their way to the three-world island sooner or later and slaughter all the cultivators of the three-world island to pay tribute to their junior brother Wang's soul in heaven. Especially the Yu Yao who had killed their junior brother Wang. They would make him suffer a fate worse than death to vent their hatred. The three-world island was shrouded in fog. No one could see what was happening on the island. Lu Yi sent a clone of his precious blood to guard the island, while his main body went deep into the 10,000 Elephant Sea to cultivate. Since the plan had been set, the next thing to do was to wait for a good opportunity. Although Lu Ye's cultivation had reached the Yu Yao realm, the efficiency of cultivating in the 10,000 Elephant Sea didn't increase by much. This was because Lu Yi didn't take the initiative to cultivate. Instead, the seawater of the 10,000 Elephant Sea was madly corroding his body. Therefore, no matter what Lu Ye's cultivation level was, the efficiency of devouring and refining the seawater in the 10,000 Elephant Sea was the same. Of course, if he took the initiative to open his body and mind to assist, the efficiency would be higher. However, in this way, the consumption of the talent tree's fuel would be greater. The current efficiency of cultivation was just right. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed. During these 2 months, the three-world island remained calm. There was also no movement on the Baiyue Island. Both sides were calm as if nothing had happened. Until one day, the clone of the precious blood that was guarding the island suddenly received a message. Lu Ye's main body immediately left the 10,000 Elephant Sea and returned to the island. After retrieving the clone of the precious blood, he sent a message to Luan Xiaoa. Then, he activated the concealment and aura-restraining spiritual inscriptions and quietly left the three-world island. After walking a long distance away, Lu Yi opened the gate of the Little Flower World. Ma Shangxi walked out of it and took out the star boat. Under the guidance of Lu Yi, they quickly flew toward the 10,000 Elephant Sea. At the same time, the entire three-world island was mobilized. All the cultivators who were cultivating in seclusion were called out. They were ready to go. The counterattack had begun. Although they didn't know whether this operation could be carried out smoothly, the three-world island had been waiting for this opportunity for 2 months. Therefore they had to seize it well. If Liu Ye's operation went well, there was still a chance for them to carry out their next plan. If Liu Ye's operation didn't go well, then everything would be over. Outside the 10,000 Elephant Sea, a huge meteorite was suspended in the starry sky. When Ma Shangxi arrived there with Liu Yi, they immediately landed on the meteor. Soon they saw Zhou Chuang, who was waiting for them there. It was Zhou Chuang who had passed on the message to him. For the past 2 months, Zhou Chuang had been monitoring the movements of the Baiyue Island. Unfortunately, the Baiyue Island had been holding back until today. He had no choice but to ask Zhou Chuang for help because the three-world island was definitely being watched. Moreover, the three-world islands Yuyao had met the Baiyue Islands Yuyao before. Therefore, if they wanted to keep an eye on the Baiyue Islands Yuyao, they could only ask for help from the four-way galaxy. So far, no one on the 10,000 Elephant Sea knew about the relationship between the three-world island and the four-way island. After greeting each other, Zhou Chuang said, "The one who came out is called Chu Zhu. She's in the late Yuyao realm. She's now in the realm." Liu Yi immediately took out a star chart to investigate. When he found that the realm in front of them was the Yuan realm, he asked, "Is this Yuan realm related to Yuandu?" Zhou Chuang nodded. Yuandu is from the Yuan realm. Other than Yuandu, there's also another person called Rizhao. Liu Yi nodded. Although he didn't know why the Baiyue Yuyao wanted to go to the Yuan realm, this indirectly confirmed that Yuandu was indeed involved in the Baiyue Island's sneak attack on Old Tang. Isn't this location a little too close? Zhou Chuang asked. We don't know much about Rizhao's ability. If a battle breaks out here and Rizhao from the Yuan realm notices, we'll be exposed. Although the native Rizhao couldn't easily take action on the 10,000 Elephant Sea due to the rules, this was no longer the 10,000 Elephant Sea. This place could be considered the Yuan realm's territory. If Rizhao from the Yuan realm sensed something and interfered, no one would criticize him. Zhou Chuang didn't know what Liu Yi wanted to do, but since Liu Yi asked him to keep an eye on someone, he would naturally do it wholeheartedly. Now that Liu Yi was rushing over, it was obvious that he wanted to harm Chu Zhu. Of course, he had to warn him. It's indeed too close. Liu Yi nodded. He looked at the star chart and said, "How about this? I'll take old Ma and retreat a little. I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on this place. If there's any movement, send me a message." Okay. Zhou Chuang nodded. Liu Yi immediately left with Ma Shangxi, retreating in the direction of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. After waiting quietly for half a day, Liu Yi received another message from Zhou Chuang. After a brief investigation, he signaled Ma Shangxi with his eyes. The latter understood and began to make preparations in secret. Not long after, 2 figures rushed over from the front. It was Zhou Chuang and Chu Zhu from the Baiyue realm. From the looks of it, the two seemed to be talking about something with a smile on their faces. Liu Yi asked Zhou Chuang to secretly keep an eye on Chu Zhu, but he walked directly with him. This was undoubtedly a very wise move because Chu Zhu was at the late stage of the Yueyao realm. If Zhou Chuang didn't want to expose himself and follow him, it would be very risky unless he was far enough away. Showing up directly and pretending to meet him by chance would undoubtedly make it easier to keep an eye on him. The distance between Foursquare Island and Baiyue Island wasn't far. Although Zhou Chuang and Chu Zhu didn't have much of a relationship, they had met a few times. Meeting in this place, it wasn't strange for them to talk and walk together. At the very least, Chu Zhu didn't expect Zhou Chuang to be secretly harboring evil intentions. Chapter 1729. In the starry sky, Chu Zhu and Zhou Chuang walked side by side, talking and laughing as they flew toward the 10,000 Elephant Sea. At a certain moment, he suddenly turned his head and saw 2 figures flying toward him. At first, Chu Zhu didn't pay much attention to them. Such coincidental encounters were very common in the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy, just like his encounter with Zhou Chuang. However, he soon realized that something was wrong because these two people were rushing straight toward him. This was obviously not normal. Chu Zhu hurriedly focused his vision, trying to see their faces. However, at this moment, magic powers suddenly surged beside him. When he turned his head, he saw Zhou Chuang, who had been talking and laughing with him just a moment ago, slamming his palm toward him. Magic powers surged from the center of his palm, and a spell technique rumbled. Chu Zhu's mind was sharp, and he instantly realized that his encounter with Zhou Chuang was a trap. This guy was in cahoots with the newcomers, and he had deliberately approached him with ulterior motives. He couldn't figure out how he had offended Zhou Chuang to make him attack him so viciously. With no time to think, Chu Zhu hurriedly summoned a defensive magic treasure. Although he hurriedly blocked Zhou Chuang's sneak attack, he was still a little embarrassed. He shouted, "Zhou Chuang, you bastard, I think you don't want Four Corner Island anymore." This was clearly a threat. Four Corner Island hadn't been in operation for a long time. No matter how intricate the defensive formation was, it couldn't be very strong without enough accumulation. If Baiyue Island wanted to attack Four Corner Island, it wouldn't end well. Chu Zhu didn't know who he had offended, so he could only intimidate Zhou Chuang and make him feel apprehensive. However, Zhou Chuang wasn't moved at all. After taking advantage of the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, he madly blasted spell technique after spell technique, forcing Chu Zhu to defend himself. Both of them were late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivators. One was unprepared, and the other was scheming. Chu Zhu immediately suffered a great loss. However, it was impossible for Zhou Chuang to kill Chu Zhu with such a sneak attack. If they fought one-on-one, when Chu Zhu recovered, it would be a fierce battle. However, Lu Yi and his servant were already closing in. Chu Zhu finally got a clear look at their faces. "It's you!" Chu Zhu was shocked. He didn't know how he had offended the Three-World Island, but now he knew that it was the Three-World Island who had plotted against him. He had seen Ma Shangxi and Lu Yi before, because in the previous operation he and that junior brother Wang had attacked Tang Jun together. In the end, Tang Jun had survived with the protection of the Red Talisman, and Lu Yi had rushed over and killed that junior brother Wang. As for him, he had been delayed by Ma Shangxi and had been unable to help. When he had sensed that junior brother Wang had died in battle, he had immediately fled. But it didn't make sense. They had come and gone in a hurry last time and hadn't left any traces behind. Moreover, they hadn't heard anything at all. How did the Three-World Island keep an eye on them? The past 2 months had been peaceful, and they had thought that Three-World Island knew nothing about Baiyu's situation. But now, it seemed that they had long known that Baiyu had acted in secret. Zhou Chuang. The Three-World Island was connected to Four Corner Island, and Zhou Chuang also recognized them. Therefore, the Three-World Island had already locked onto Baiyu 2 months ago. They didn't make any movements these days just to numb them. This time, they had been ordered to leave the island and head to the Yiyuan realm, and they had seized this opportunity. In an instant, Chu Zhu understood the whole story, and he realized that he was in a bad situation this time. Ma Shangxi had already rushed over, and a sea of blood spread out, directly enveloping Zhou Chuang and Chu Zhu. Although Chu Zhu was startled, he didn't panic. Because he had escaped from Ma Shangxi's sea of blood before, he was currently tangling with Zhou Chuang while circulating his magic power in all directions, trying to reproduce the technique he had used that day. In the end, he was surprised to find that the sea of blood this time was somewhat different from the last time. It was more viscous, more stable. Even with his techniques, he couldn't break free from the sea of blood's shackles. In terms of cultivation, Ma Shangxi was slightly higher than Chu Zhu. Although Yu Yao's peak was also in the late stage, her limit was still close to the sunshine level. Last time, Chu Zhu was able to escape mainly because of Ma Shangxi. Back then, in order to save Old Tang, Lu Yi had made Ma Shangxi explode her precious blood to activate the blood escape technique. In a short period of time, she had expended too much of her vitality, and she couldn't unleash her full strength at all. This gave Chu Zhu a chance to escape. This time, it was different. Not to mention that Ma Shangxi didn't expend any energy, just Zhou Chuang alone was enough to tie him down. With the two of them working together, it was impossible for Chu Zhu to escape from the sea of blood again. the three Yu Yaos fought fiercely in the sea of blood. Their magic power vibrated endlessly, and the sea of blood surged and boiled. Chu Zhu knew that he was most likely doomed this time. His face was full of unwillingness, but there was nothing he could do. All of a sudden, he took out his strongest defensive magic treasure to protect his body. Then, he quickly took out his musical notes. He wasn't asking for help. At this time, it was definitely too late to ask for help from Baiyue Island. He took out his musical note to send a message to Baiyue Island so that Yu Huan and the others could be on guard. Seeing the musical note in his hand, Zhou Chuang immediately saw through his thoughts. He shouted in a low voice, "This is bad. Stop him." He was also afraid that today's matter would be leaked. Four Corner Island and Baiyue Island weren't far apart. If today's matter was leaked, Four Corner Island's situation wouldn't be too good in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhou Chuang's heart suddenly trembled. This was because, not far from him, an extremely sharp aura suddenly erupted. Even a late-stage Yu Yao like him couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. Then, in the boundless sea of blood, a dazzling saber light flashed. This saber light seemed to be able to split the sea of blood into two. Even Zhou Chuang's vision was cut off. When he returned to his senses, he heard Chu Zhu's muffled groan. He raised his head and looked over. His face was filled with shock, because the defensive magic treasure Chu Zhu had summoned earlier had already shattered. Even the arm that held the musical note had been directly cut off. The severed arm was quickly swept away by the whirlpool of the sea of blood, disappearing without a trace. Zhou Chuang suddenly turned his head and saw Lu Yi, who had been standing quietly to the side since the beginning of the battle. At this moment, the saber at his waist had already been unsheathed. He held the saber in his right hand at an angle. Zhou Chuang's eyelids twitched. He was certain that the saber strike just now was Lu Ye's masterpiece. However, could an early-stage Yu Yao really break a late-stage Yu Yao's defensive magic treasure with a single saber strike and cut off his arm? He had experienced the power of the defensive magic treasure. Even he couldn't break it in a short time. How did Lu Yi do it? If he hadn't been on guard against such a saber strike, would he still be alive? Lu Yi should have just become a Yu Yao not long ago. How could he be so powerful? However, Zhou Chuang soon realized that the saber strike was probably a secret technique. It was a secret technique that put a huge burden on the user. At this moment, Lu Ye's saber-wielding right hand was trembling. Even so, it gave Zhou Chuang an indescribable shock. The saber slash was indeed powerful. This was Lu Ye's third time using it. However, even with the previous two experiences, he still couldn't perfectly control the saber strike. To put it simply, he was no longer able to control his saber once it was unleashed. Whether this saber strike would kill Chu Zhu or cut off one of his arms, it would all depend on luck. Fortunately, he was lucky this time. Chu Zhu didn't die, but his arm holding the musical note was cut off. As a result, he couldn't send a message outside. The saber slash alone might not have been able to achieve this because Chu Zhu had activated the defensive magic treasure's power before Lu Yi had attacked. However, even with the mountain pan saber, the defensive magic treasure couldn't block it. When the mountain pan saber was a spirit treasure, it only had the power of Fang. The wound caused by the saber would be entangled by the power of Fang, making it difficult to heal. However, after becoming a magic treasure, the mountain pan saber had gained another characteristic. It was especially destructive to defensive magic treasures. That was the result of the saber strike. Chu Zhu growled in pain. His face was pale, but he continued to resist. Lu Yi calmed down the surging qi and blood around him and charged forward with his saber. At the same time, he transmitted his voice, "Fellow Taoist Zhou, retreat." Hearing this, Zhou Chuang immediately retreated from the battlefield. Lu Yi took his place. In the current situation, Chu Zhu was completely under his control. He couldn't do anything. Moreover, Lu Ye's strength was too terrifying. Zhou Chuang naturally didn't worry about any accidents. He originally thought that Lu Yi wanted to kill Chu Zhu personally to vent his anger. However, he soon realized that something was wrong. In the following battle, not only did he not interfere, but Ma Shangxi also didn't interfere. She only maintained the sea of blood and created an advantageous battle environment for Lu Yi. Lu Yi had no intention of killing Chu Zhu as quickly as possible. Instead, he kept tormenting Chu Zhu. Every time his figure flashed, he would inflict some non-fatal wounds on Chu Zhu. Chu Zhu was very strong-willed and unyielding. If it were other cowardly cultivators, they would have already begged for mercy. However, he didn't. In the face of such treatment, he could only curse and yell that he would rather die than be humiliated. Lu Ye's expression was indifferent. He didn't move at all. It was as if he was determined to slowly torture Chu Zhu to death. Even Zhou Chuang couldn't bear to see this. However, he didn't try to persuade Lu Yi. If Baiyue Island attacked Three World Island, then Lu Yi and Chu Zhu would be enemies. No matter how cruel one was to an enemy, it wouldn't be excessive. However, from Lu Ye's expression, it didn't seem like he was deliberately torturing Chu Zhu. Thus, he couldn't figure out what Lu Yi was doing. After an hour, Chu Zhu's entire body was covered in wounds. His entire body was extremely weak. A late-stage Yu Yao shouldn't be in such a state. However, the wounds caused by the mountain pan saber couldn't heal. Moreover, Ma Shangxi occasionally used the blood tracing technique. It was already a sign of his tenacity that he didn't die. However, at this moment, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was better off dead. Lu Yi stopped attacking and slowly walked to Chu Zhu. He looked at him calmly and threatened, "Don't worry, I won't kill you for now. I'll bring you to Baiyue Island and cut you into pieces outside. I'll let you Huan and the others know the consequences of offending Three World Island." Acute gastroenteritis. He was tossed around in the hospital for half a day. He even had an allergic reaction when he was on a drip. In the end, his butt was injected with an anti-allergic medicine. How miserable. Today's update was over. He was really exhausted. End of chapter. Chapter 1730. In the Blood Sea, Zhou Chuang's eyes twitched as he listened to Lu Ye's vicious words. If he were to be captured alive by the enemy and brought to Four Corner Island, where he would be cut into pieces in front of the many cultivators in the galaxy, he would rather die here and be done with it. He had never seen such a vicious side to Lu Yi before and couldn't help but sigh. The human heart was truly unpredictable. This also proved that Lu Yi was furious that Baiyue Island had ambushed Tang Jun. As soon as Lu Ye's voice fell, Chu Zhu's originally dim eyes suddenly surged with boundless anger, followed by a burst of divine light. At the same time, his spiritual energy surged out. Sensing the fluctuations of his opponent's spiritual energy, the corners of Lu Ye's mouth curled up into a smile and he immediately opened up his spiritual energy. "Be careful, fellow Taoist Lu." Zhou Chuang was alarmed. When he saw Lu Yi approach Chu Zhu without any precaution, he already had a bad feeling. After all, Chu Zhu was still a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator. What if he suddenly unleashed his full power on the verge of death? When fighting with an enemy, the biggest taboo was to be careless before everything was settled. It was not uncommon for one to fail miserably at an easy task. Now, it seemed that his worries had come true. The fluctuations of Chu Zhu's spiritual energy undoubtedly meant that he had started a soul battle against Lu Yi. It was undeniable that Lu Yi was very strong, far stronger than an ordinary early-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator, but that was only in terms of physical strength. As an early-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator, how strong could his spiritual energy be? He was definitely inferior to Chu Zhu. If Lu Yi couldn't resist Chu Zhu's soul battle, the consequences would be unimaginable. Zhou Chuang was speechless. Lu Yi was still too young. He thought that victory was already in his grasp, so he became arrogant and domineering. If he allowed Lu Yi to turn the tables in the soul battle, he would die in vain. As soon as these words fell, Zhou Chuang's face turned pale because he didn't feel the slightest trace of resistance from Lu Yi. The fierce spiritual energy fluctuations just now had disappeared without a trace. This undoubtedly meant that the soul battle had begun. Chu Zhu's soul body had already invaded Lu Ye's spirit sea. All the dangers were hidden inside the spirit sea, so outsiders couldn't sense the slightest movement. Zhou Chuang hurriedly thought for a moment and said to Ma Shangxi, "Fellow Taoist, please protect me. I'll go and help fellow Taoist Lu." Clearly, he also wanted to participate in the soul battle. Now that Lu Ye's divine soul defenses had been broken through by Chu Zhu, it shouldn't be difficult for his soul to leave his body and enter Lu Ye's divine sea. When the time came, he should be able to ensure Lu Ye's safety. As he spoke, he began to activate his spiritual energy. Ma Shangxi raised her hand to stop him. Wait! Chuang Zhou was stunned for a moment and looked at him in confusion. Ma Shangxi said, "It's all within the plan. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry." Zhou Chuang was dumbfounded. Within the plan? In other words, Lu Yi had already anticipated this? Zhou Chuang thought about it carefully and quickly found the problem. Even if there was a difference in their cultivation levels, it would not be easy for Chu Zhu to start a soul battle against Lu Yi. However, Lu Yi had no intention of defending himself at all. In just an instant, Chu Zhu had broken through his soul defense. Thinking back to how Lu Yi had tortured Chu Zhu, how he had carelessly approached Chu Zhu, and how he had said those vicious words, Zhou Chuang came to a sudden realization. Fellow Taoist Lu's previous actions were to force Chu Zhu to start a soul battle against him? That's right. Ma Shangxi nodded. Zhou Chuang was confused. But why? Why would he start a soul battle? Was there any benefit in doing so? Could it be that Lu Yi was so vicious that he not only wanted to torture Chu Zhu on a physical level but also on a divine soul level? That was far too vicious. Zhou Chuang faintly felt that things weren't that simple. However, since Ma Shangxi said that this was all within the plan, he had nothing to worry about. Since Lu Yi dared to do this, he definitely had confidence in himself. Looking at it now, Lu Yi did not start a soul battle himself because he did not have the confidence to break through Chu Zhu's soul defense. Therefore, he forced Chu Zhu to make the first move. In this way, as long as he did not defend himself, the soul battle would naturally succeed. At this moment, inside Lu Ye's divine sea, Chu Zhu's soul body was holding a sword-like soul treasure. He had originally planned to cause a ruckus here and let Lu Yi know the consequences of underestimating him. However, when he looked over, he saw a divine lotus in Lu Ye's divine sea. It was blooming with 7-colored light. Even his soul body, a foreign soul body, felt comfortable in the light. What was that? Although Chu Zhu did not know what it was, he immediately realized that the divine lotus was an incredible soul treasure. What shocked him wasn't just the 7-colored divine lotus, it was the fact that a tattered ship had suddenly emerged from the waves in front of the divine lotus, and it lay before him. In the blink of an eye, the dilapidated ship became whole again. Not only that, but there were also many figures on the ship, each taking their own position. On the deck, Lu Ye's soul stood there quietly, looking over from afar with an indifferent gaze, as if he was looking at an ant. What was that? He had seen many soul treasures, but what he saw today was shocking and beyond his imagination. While he was still thinking, Lu Yi waved his hand and the ship rushed towards Chu Zhu's soul body. As it moved, the ship's array buzzed and many attacks fell from the sky. This soul battle had only lasted for half a cup of tea's time. After Chu Zhu saw the terror of the specter ship, he wanted to escape. However, since he had entered, how could it be so easy to leave? He could easily break through Lu Ye's soul defense because Lu Yi did not put up any defense. It did not mean that Lu Ye's soul defense was weak. Now that his divine sea was sealed, it was like beating a dog behind closed doors. After his physical body was tortured, Chu Zhu's soul body was also covered in wounds. After half a cup of tea's time, his soul treasure sword shattered and his soul body became dim. On the specter ship, Lu Yi captured Chu Zhu's soul body with a cold expression, ambushing Chu Zhu, tormenting him, and inducing him to start a soul battle. It was all for this moment. Soul control. Since he wanted to conquer Baiyue Island from the inside, he naturally had to start from the inside. Lu Yi had long planned to use the power of soul control to enslave the people of Baiyue Island. Only then could he destroy the island's protective array. Ordinary constellation realm cultivators were not his target. His target was the few Yu Yao of Baiyue Island. In the past, Lu Yi had used soul control to enslave Dao Shisan and a cultivator from the blood refinement realm. However, Dao Shisan lacked intelligence, and the cultivators from the blood refinement realm were not strong, so it was not difficult to control them. However, if he wanted to use soul control to enslave a late-stage Yu Yao with his current cultivation level, it would be extremely difficult. Under normal circumstances, it was basically impossible to succeed. Even though soul control had been deduced by the talent tree, its effects had become stronger than before. Therefore, he had to wear down Chu Zhu's willpower to the lowest level. This was the fundamental reason why Lu Yi had first tortured him physically, then ravaged him in the soul battle. Suffering both physically and mentally, it could be said that Chu Zhu's willpower had fallen to its lowest point. Only then could he use soul control. After calming himself down, Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed it against Chu Zhu's soul body. Under the activation of the soul control divine rune, it enveloped Chu Zhu's soul body. If he succeeded, conquering Baiyue Island would be a piece of cake. This was because Chu Zhu would become his spy in Baiyue Island. With such a spy, Baiyue Island's protective array would be useless. Under the envelopment of the light, Chu Zhu's exhausted soul body seemed to have no reaction. Just when Lu Yi felt that everything was going smoothly, Chu Zhu's resistance suddenly came. Moreover, it was unprecedentedly fierce. Although Chu Zhu didn't know what Lu Yi was doing, as the soul control divine rune continued to take effect, he faintly realized what was going on. This guy was an extremely unyielding person. This could be seen from the previous battle. Even though he had been tortured to the point of no return, he hadn't begged for mercy. How could such a person be willing to become someone else's slave? Under the stimulation of the soul control divine rune, Chu Zhu's willpower, which had already been worn down, started to boil again. As he furiously resisted, he gritted his teeth and growled, "You want to enslave me? Give up. Even if I die, I won't let you have your way." As soon as he finished speaking, cracking sounds could be heard. Lu Yi suddenly discovered that Chu Zhu's soul body was showing signs of shattering. This was undoubtedly a sign that Chu Zhu's soul body was about to collapse. If he didn't give up, Chu Zhu's soul body would definitely shatter. However, if he gave up, then all his previous efforts would have been in vain. Lu Yi couldn't help but sigh. It had still come to this. Before coming up with this plan, he had already predicted that this would happen. Yu Yao's willpower was very strong in the later stages. Even though he had set up a perfect foundation, he still couldn't plant the soul control divine rune in Chu Zhu's soul body. Fortunately, he had a backup plan. However, this backup plan was slightly more risky than enslaving Chu Zhu. Moreover, Lu Yi didn't want to do this unless it was absolutely necessary. This was because he was traumatized by what he was about to do next. One point of spiritual connection. If the soul control divine rune didn't work, then he could only use one point of spiritual connection to pry into Chu Zhu's memories. Ever since he had done this in the blood refinement realm, Lu Yi hadn't done it again. This was because it didn't feel good to have so many complicated memories flooding into another person's mind. One point of spiritual connection had also been derived from the talent tree. Seeing that Chu Zhu's soul body was showing signs of shattering, Lu Yi didn't hesitate any longer. He steeled his heart and transformed the soul control divine rune into one point of spiritual connection. In an instant, a lot of complicated information flooded into Lu Yi, causing him to feel a splitting headache. At the same time, Chu Zhu also sensed many of Lu Ye's memories and secrets. Under such a huge impact, his already cracked soul body couldn't bear the burden, and the speed at which it shattered increased. After a short while, as Chu Zhu's soul body completely shattered, Lu Yi stood up shakily. He felt very uncomfortable. He secretly decided that no matter what, he would never use this method again. This was simply inhumane. Lu Yi wasn't in a hurry to leave the Divine Sea. His soul body sat cross-legged on the specter ship. A lot of complicated information flowed through his mind as Lu Yi began to search for useful information. Chapter 1731. Within the Sea of Blood, Zhou Chuang and Ma Shangxi protected Lu Yi as they waited quietly. After a long while, Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes. His face was slightly pale, and even his eyes were slightly dim. This was undoubtedly the aftereffect of using a bit of spiritual perception. In front of him, Chu Zhu couldn't be any more dead. Whether it was his physical body or his soul, they were all in tatters. Lu Yi took off Chu Zhu's storage ring and put his body into the little flower realm. He then looked at Zhou Chuang and said, "Thank you for your help, fellow cultivator." Zhou Chuang waved his hand and said, "I didn't do much. What do you want to do next? Do you need my Four-Corner Island's help?" He had already told the other Yu Yao in the galaxy about the Three-World Island. They all agreed that if the Three-World Island needed help, they would do their best to help. They didn't contact the Three-World Island in the past because they were afraid that they would implicate the Three-World Island. After all, they had caused a lot of trouble after coming to the Myriad Domain Sea. However, the Three-World Island was already in trouble, so there was no need to worry about implicating them. "There's no need for that for now. I'll take care of the rest myself," Lu Yi said. After a short while, the three of them went their separate ways. Ma Shangxi took Lu Yi and hurried towards the Myriad Domain Sea. Chu Zhu's death couldn't be hidden for too long. If anyone on Baiyue Island tried to contact Chu Zhu, they would be aware of it. After all, the sound talisman would lose its effect when a cultivator died. Lu Yi had used the feedback from the sound talisman to determine whether Tang Jun was dead or alive. Therefore, if he wanted to take over Baiyue Island, he had to act quickly. Once Baiyue Island discovered Chu Zhu's death, Lu Yi would have no room to carry out his plan. While hurrying towards Baiyue Island, Lu Yi was also digesting the information he had obtained from Chu Zhu. Because Chu Zhu's soul had already begun to shatter during the process of using a bit of spiritual perception, the information Lu Yi obtained from him was not complete. Many things were scattered. However, this was already enough. Since Lu Yi was in a hurry, Ma Shangxi naturally didn't dare to delay. The vast sea of blood had now condensed into a small sphere that enveloped him and Lu Yi. Their speed was raised to the limit. The reason why they didn't use the starboat was because Lu Yi had instructed them to do something under the cover of the blood sea. If they used the starboat, it wouldn't be as convenient. Ma Shangxi didn't know what Lu Yi wanted to do, so she didn't ask. But soon, a look of surprise appeared on his face. He turned his head and looked to his side, because he suddenly noticed that his holy venerable's aura was rapidly changing, and he no longer seemed like a holy venerable. This was undoubtedly an inconceivable thing. Every cultivator had their own unique aura, especially when they were channeling their power. Although this aura would sometimes change slightly, it would not change too much. However, Ma Shangxi found it hard to understand Lu Ye's current situation. Lu Ye's aura had undergone a fundamental change. If Ma Shangxi didn't look at it with her eyes and only used her spiritual sense to perceive it, she wouldn't have been able to tell that this aura belonged to Lu Yi. What surprised him even more was that as Lu Ye's aura changed, his aura also increased. He was clearly only at the early stage of Moon Jade Realm, but at this moment, he was displaying the aura and magic power fluctuations of a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator. If Ma Shangxi wasn't sure that it was Lu Yi who was wrapped in the blood sea, he would almost think that he was carrying Chu Zhu. Because the feeling Lu Yi gave him at this moment was too similar to that unlucky Chu Zhu. "Do I look like him?" Lu Yi suddenly asked. Ma Shangxi quickly nodded. "Exactly the same." Lu Yi didn't comment. The pseudomite spirit tattoos deduced by the talent tree were undoubtedly more useful than before. This was because the previous pseudomite spirit tattoos could only change Lu Ye's aura, but not his aura. However, the current pseudomite spirit tattoos could even change Lu Ye's aura. In the previous battle, Lu Yi had personally tortured Chu Zhu with his saber, not only to destroy his physical body, but also to familiarize himself with his aura during the battle in preparation for the current pseudomite spirit tattoos. Now, it seemed to be working well. Of course, if there was someone who was really familiar with Chu Zhu here, Lu Yi couldn't be sure if they would notice any flaws. In Ma Shangxi's eyes, his pseudomite spirit tattoos were flawless because Ma Shangxi wasn't familiar with Chu Zhu. However, if he met someone who was familiar with Chu Zhu, he still had to be careful. As the pseudomite spirit tattoos were activated and maintained, Lu Yi immediately activated the thousand-faced spirit tattoos to strengthen himself. His appearance rapidly changed, and even his body shape began to change in the direction of Chu Zhu. Cracking sounds came from his bones, and he became a little shorter out of thin air. In the past, the thousand-faced spirit tattoos could only change one's appearance. However, with the 1,000-faced spirit tattoos deduced by the talent tree, even the body shape could be slightly changed. Of course, there was a limit to this kind of change. It was impossible to say that he could turn into a demonic beast. Chu Zhu was a human, and so was Lu Yi. Moreover, the two of them were about the same size, so there was room for change. Ma Shangxi's mouth was wide open, and he couldn't close it for a long time. He really couldn't understand what kind of magical skill the Lord was using. With the pseudomite spirit tattoos and the 1,000-faced spirit tattoos, Lu Yi beside him was a living Chu Zhu. At least in Ma Shangxi's eyes, there was no flaw to speak of. It was only at this moment that Ma Shangxi finally understood what the Lord was planning. It was obvious that he wanted to use Chu Zhu's identity to sneak into Baiyue Island and cause a ruckus. If Baiyue Island was not prepared, then the situation would be critical. After the 1,000-faced spirit tattoos, Lu Yi then began to crack Chu Zhu's storage ring. It was not difficult at all. It seemed that his disguise had even deceived the restriction on the storage ring. After a short while, he took out a set of clothes that Chu Zhu usually wore from the storage ring and changed into them. He then rearranged his hairstyle, kept his pan shan saber, and changed his voice. He chatted with Ma Shangxi for a while, trying his best to perfect his disguise. Baiyue Island in the entire Wanxiang Sea was a good treasure land. This spiritual island had been a high-grade spiritual island since a few thousand years ago. Up until now, there hadn't been many changes. The Baiyu Galaxy had attacked and occupied this spiritual island over 800 years ago. Ever since then, they had been the owner of this island. After 800 years of peace, the protective formation had accumulated a lot of power. One could imagine how strong the spiritual island's defense was. Baiyue Island was not the only one like this. In fact, most of the superior spiritual islands on the Wanxiang Sea were in the same situation. Many forces had occupied a superior spiritual island for a long time, and their defense was impenetrable. This was also the reason why there were very few battles on the superior spiritual islands on the Wanxiang Sea. Firstly, there was Ri Zhao to coordinate behind the scenes. Secondly, without enough power, it was impossible to break the protective formation of the superior spiritual islands. Take Baiyue Island for example. If one wanted to break its protective formation, at least 10 Yuyaos would have to attack it continuously for 1 or 2 days. However, would Baiyue Island give others such a chance? When someone attacked, they could fight back. The array formations and Dharma treasures on the island were not just for show. Baiyue Island was not small, but it was not very big either. It could barely meet the needs of the Baiyue Galaxy's cultivators for their own cultivation. Therefore, it was not a commercial spiritual island. Most of the cultivators living on the island were from the Baiyue Galaxy. A figure rushed over from afar. When he arrived in front of the protective formation, he took out a token and waved it. The protective formation immediately cracked open, and the figure flashed in. The cultivator in charge of guarding the island sensed the movement and looked up. When he saw that it was Martial Uncle Chu Zhu, he looked away. Of course, Chu Zhu was not Chu Zhu, but Lu Yi. It was impossible for Lu Yi to enter Baiyue Island so openly just by relying on the fake power and the 1,000-faced spirit inscriptions. The protective formation alone was enough to stop him outside. Chu Zhu was a Yueyao of the Baiyue Island. He could not possibly let the protective formation open to let him in. Otherwise, he would be exposed. However, Lu Yi did not only have these 2 spirit inscriptions. He also had a large number of memory fragments from Chu Zhu. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to enter Baiyue Island. If it were someone else, even if they had the ability to disguise as Chu Zhu, they would not be able to move as easily as Lu Yi without Chu Zhu's memory. From Chu Zhu's memory fragments, Lu Yi roughly knew why he was ordered to go to the Yiyuan world this time. However, he did not know the specifics. According to the original itinerary, Chu Zhu would definitely meet with the other Yueyao on the island after he returned and explain the situation in the Yiyuan world. However, Lu Yi was not Chu Zhu. He did not know who Chu Zhu was talking to in the Yiyuan world, so why would he meet with the other Yueyao? He had come here to avoid contact with the other Yueyao as much as possible. Time was short, so as soon as he entered Baiyue Island, He went straight in one direction. Soon he arrived. It was a large hall. There were cultivators guarding both inside and outside the hall. It was obviously an important place. This was indeed an important place because it was one of the array bases of Baiue Island's protective formation. The array bases placed here were the foundation to maintain the operation of the protective formation. At the same time, it was also a central place to accumulate energy. There were a total of 8 array bases like this on Baiue Island. As soon as Lu Yi appeared, the cultivators guarding outside the hall immediately came forward and respectfully said, "Greetings, Martial Uncle." Lu Yi nodded and walked straight into the hall. At the same time he ordered, "Activate the hall's array formation. The protective formation is not operating smoothly. I want to check the cause." Among the various information he had obtained from Chu Zhu, the most beneficial one was that Chu Zhu actually cultivated Formation Dao. Therefore, he was qualified to make some adjustments and check the protective formation on Baiue Island. Of course, even if he did not have this reason, the Yueyao below him would not say anything if he came to give orders as a Yueyao. However, the identity of a Formation Dao cultivator undoubtedly made it easier for Lu Yi to move around. Upon hearing Lu Ye's words, the Yueyao did not hesitate. She immediately took a step into the hall and shouted, "Activate the hall's array formation." End of chapter. Chapter 1732. Since this palace was the base of the island's grand formation, they naturally wouldn't let their guard down. A large number of formations had been set up both inside and outside the palace. This was to ensure that even if someone infiltrated the island, once the palace's formations were activated, they wouldn't be able to destroy the formation base in a short period of time. This kind of security couldn't be said to be lax, but it just so happened that they ran into Lu Yi. There were also 5 or 6 cultivators on duty inside the palace. Although they were only in the constellation realm and didn't count for much in Lu Ye's eyes, if he forcefully dealt with them, he would definitely reveal some clues and be discovered. However, after he gave the order as Chu Zhu, these people immediately activated the palace's formations. When the buzzing sound rang out, the entire palace was enveloped by the formation, isolating it from the outside world. Lu Yi knew that the commotion here would definitely alarm the other Yu Yaos on the island, so after the formation was activated, he didn't hesitate to open the door to the Little Flower Realm. The constellation cultivators of Baiue Island were all looking at Lu Yi, waiting for his next order. Unexpectedly, a door suddenly appeared out of thin air, stunning them. They didn't know what Martial Uncle Chu Zhu was doing. In the next moment, the door rippled, and a figure walked out. It was Ma Shangxi. When they approached Baiue Island, Lu Yi had put him into the Little Flower Realm. Now that they were about to make a move, he naturally had to let him out. While the constellation cultivators of Baiue Island were still in a daze, a bloody light blossomed in their field of vision. Then, it filled the entire palace. Cultivators continuously walked out of the door to the Little Flower Realm. They were all cultivators of the 3-realm island. After more than 100 people had walked out, Lu Yi closed the door and walked out. The palace's formation was still maintained, but no one knew that the inside of the palace had changed. Lu Yi had just left the palace's formation when he heard a voice by his ear. "Junior Martial Brother, what are you doing?" He knew that the commotion here had indeed attracted the attention of Baiue Island's Yu Yaos. This person was asking him through voice transmission. As expected, it was impossible for his plan to go smoothly without any setbacks. Thus, when faced with the other party's question, Lu Ye's expression didn't change as he replied, "When I came back, I discovered that the formation's operation was a bit abnormal. I'm checking it." The voice didn't doubt him. After all, Chu Zhu was originally responsible for this. He said, "Junior Martial Brother, check it in detail. The formation is very important, so you can't be careless." "Yes. When you're done here, remember to come and see me," the other party reminded again. "Got it." While talking to the other party, Lu Yi quickly arrived at the hall where the second array base was located. The deployment here was exactly the same as the previous hall, with almost no differences. Lu Yi did the same and quickly took control of the palace from the inside, leaving Wan Xiao to lead the 100 constellations to hide inside. Next came the third one, and the cultivators of the 3 realms, led by Yen Miao, remained behind. When he reached the 4th hall, Lu Ye's footsteps paused slightly because there was a figure waiting in front of him. Yu Yao's cultivation was at the middle stage. Although she was on Baiyue Island, she wasn't one of the 5 great guardians of the island. His situation on Baiyue Island was the same as Tang Jun and Cheng Xian's current position. As they were not registered, they could not participate in the battle of the spiritual island. However, this didn't stop him from staying on Baiyue Island. Initially, there were 7 Yu Yao on Baiyue Island. There were 5 great guardians, 1 more in addition to Lu Yu. However, after one Yu Yao was killed by Lu Yi, another Yu Yao was registered under Yu Huan's lead and replaced the one who had been killed. Lu Yu didn't have to register and could still perform his role. This was because, like Chu Zhu, he also cultivated the array Dao. In terms of cultivation, he was inferior to Chu Zhu, but in terms of array Dao, he was more powerful than Chu Zhu. Therefore, on Baiyue Island, he and Chu Zhu handled matters related to array Dao together. It could even be said that he was in charge. The reason he was waiting here was obviously because he had heard about the situation and specially came over. As expected, after seeing Lu Yi, Lu Yu said, "Senior brother, what's wrong with the operation of the Great Array? We're still investigating, but we already have some clues. Come, I'll tell you in detail." Lu Yi stepped forward and put his arm around Lu Yu's shoulder, then walked towards the hall. Lu Yu instantly felt a little uncomfortable because Chu Zhu had never treated him so warmly before. However, he didn't suspect anything and was led into the hall by Lu Yi. "Activate the Great Hall's array Dao," Lu Yi instructed as usual. Lu Yu looked puzzled. If there's a problem with the island's array Dao, why do we have to activate the array Dao here? There was no connection between the two. If they wanted to investigate the island's array Dao, they only needed to check the situation at the array base. This was common knowledge. Don't ask so many questions. You'll know in a moment. The problem this time is a little troublesome, Lu Yi deliberately mystified. However, Lu Yi shook his head and said, "Senior brother, if we really did that, it would obstruct the island's array Dao's inspection. It might even cause us to make some mistakes. Senior brother, tell me first, what's wrong with the island's array Dao?" In terms of array Dao, he was more powerful than Chu Zhu, so he firmly believed that Chu Zhu had done something wrong this time. Lu Yi glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and sighed softly. "What's wrong?" Lu Yu was a little puzzled. He felt that senior brother Chu Zhu was a little strange today, but he couldn't tell what exactly was strange. "Junior brother, look at what this is," Lu Yi suddenly said. Then he reached out and grabbed. A long saber suddenly appeared in his hand, and he held it horizontally in front of Lu Yu. Lu Yu stared at the mountain saber in confusion. He couldn't follow Lu Ye's train of thought at all. Just as he was about to ask, a clanging sound rang out, and a saber light flashed in his vision. At such a close distance, and Lu Yu wasn't on guard against Lu Yi at all, how could a mid-stage Yu Yao block the mountain saber's attack? A line of blood seeped out from Lu Yu's neck. He vaguely realized what had happened, and his eyes were filled with fear and disbelief. He couldn't believe that senior brother Chu Zhu would attack him. Perhaps it was a flash of inspiration before he died, or perhaps it was because Lu Yi had revealed a flaw in his attack, but Lu Yu shouted, "You're not Chu Zhu." As he shouted, his transcendence energy surged, as if to warn Lu Yi. However, in the next moment, his head flew high into the air, and blood spurted out from his neck. In the main hall, the cultivators on duty were dumbfounded. In that instant, Uncle Master Chu Zhu suddenly attacked Uncle Master Lu Yu, and the latter was beheaded before he could even react. Witnessing a Yu Yao die tragically in front of their eyes was a huge psychological and visual impact. After Lu Yi killed Lu Yu, he took out his own sound talisman and sent a message out. Then, he looked at the cultivators expressionlessly. The cultivators trembled in fear. Almost at the same moment Lu Yu died, divine senses from Baiyue Island spread over. The divine senses of the 4 Yu Yao were the strongest. The commotion caused by Yu Yao's death was too obvious, so they immediately sensed it. Lu Yu's shout before he died made them realize the severity of the matter. In the secret chambers, the 4 Yuyao guardians emerged from seclusion at almost the same time. However, before they could rush to Lu Ye's side, the entire Baiyue Island suddenly buzzed. Then, the island's protective formation trembled a few times, and its light dimmed significantly. At this moment, the cultivators on duty in Lu Ye's main hall had already been killed. Even the formation base left here had been completely destroyed by Lu Yi in a short period of time. At the same time, Ma Shangxi, Luan Xiaoa, and the Misty Mist tribe, who he had arranged beforehand, also attacked together. The formation bases in the other 3 main halls were also destroyed. There were only 8 protective formations in the entire Baiyue Island. Although 4 of them were destroyed at once, the island's protective formation was not completely destroyed. The impact was significant. "How dare you, thief!" Yu Huan shouted angrily. He charged in Lu Ye's direction, arriving before him in the blink of an eye. He wasn't the only one approaching. The other 3 Yuyao guardians were also approaching. Lu Yi weighed his strength against the other parties and chose not to take the risk. He didn't fear any of the Yuyao guardians in a one-on-one battle, but now that 4 of them were charging at him, he had no choice but to avoid them. He stood in place and coldly looked in Yu Huan's direction. He said indifferently, "This is only the interest. Since you chose to attack my 3-realm island, you should have known this day would come. Today, the cultivators of the 3 realms will destroy your Baiyue Island." Yu Huan's eyes widened in anger. He raised his hand and summoned an arrow-like magic treasure. After a slight tremble, it shot towards Lu Yi like a bolt of lightning. However, just as the magic treasure's attack was about to reach him, spirit patterns suddenly appeared beneath Lu Ye's feet, and he disappeared into thin air. Yu Huan was stunned as he looked in the direction Lu Yi had disappeared. He naturally saw that Lu Yi wasn't dead, but he had used some unknown method to suddenly disappear. On Baiyue Island's side, Lu Yi had been killed. Since the enemy dared to impersonate Chu Zhu, it meant that Chu Zhu had most likely met with misfortune as well. 4 of their formation bases had been destroyed. It could be said that this was a crisis they hadn't encountered in 800 years. Moreover, he could sense that many enemies had appeared in 3 of the 4 formation base palaces. Moreover, each of the palaces was presided over by an invading Yuyao. He didn't know how so many people had managed to break in, but it definitely had something to do with the person impersonating Chu Zhu. After all, that person had been to these 3 palaces before. Yu Huan's eyes burned with hatred when he heard Lu Yi report his origins from 3-realm island. He immediately took out a sound talisman and sent out a message. "You can attack now. 3-realm island has sent out troops to ambush my Baiyue Island. They've sent out at least 4 Yuyao and 500 cultivators." Baiyue Island had occupied this place for 800 years, so they naturally had many allies. The target of Yu Huan's message was one of the allies that was close to 3-realm island. They were very interested in the 3-realm island, and Baiyue Island had many connections with them. End of this chapter. Chapter 1733. At this moment, Yu Huan had sent a message over. Clearly, he had realized that this was an opportunity. Although the main island had suffered great losses and was facing a crisis, the 3-world island had mobilized so many forces. Their defenses would definitely be weak. If a 3rd force suddenly attacked the 3-world island at this moment, the island would definitely fall. Perhaps they could use this to resolve the crisis on the Baiyue Island. There were many rules in the Wanxiang Sea. For example, there were at most 5 registered Yuyao on each spiritual island. Only these 5 Yuyao could directly participate in the battle for the spiritual islands. Those who were not registered were not qualified to participate directly. Another example was that in the battle for the spiritual islands, only 2 forces could compete on each battlefield. A 3rd force was not allowed to interfere. This was a rule set by Sunshine of the 10,000 Elephant Sea to avoid large-scale battles. If there was no such rule, then once a battle broke out, everyone would drag their allies into the battle. Sooner or later, it would cause chaos in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, which would be detrimental to their management. Moreover, once a battle broke out, hatred would increase, and everyone would be able to obtain less benefits. These rules were born in a special environment like the Wanxiang Sea. There were too many forces gathered in this space wonder. If these seemingly unreasonable rules were not set, there would be no long-term development. Therefore, even though the Baiyue Island had many allies, Yuhuan could not get them to support the main island. This was because this battlefield belonged to the Three-World Island and the Baiyue Island. Any third force was not allowed to interfere. However, he could send a message to his allies to attack the Three-World Island. The Three-World Island was another battlefield. Not long after the message was sent out, on another spiritual island, planetary ships soared into the sky and charged towards the Three-World Island. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The defensive strength of the Three-World Island was obvious to these observant people. Therefore, when they found out that at least 4 Yu Yao and 500 cultivators had launched a sneak attack on Baiyue Island, the spiritual island that was in contact with Yuhuan realized that this was the best opportunity to take over the Three-World Island. This was because the Three-World Island did not have many defensive forces at the moment. Moreover, the Three-World Island had not been in operation for long. The island guarding formation definitely did not have a strong defensive power. If they attacked now, they would be able to take down the Three-World Island. Just as Lu Ye's identity was exposed, and the 500 cultivators led by the 3 Yu Yao destroyed Baiyue Island's 3 formation bases, a figure who had been hiding on an uninhabited island not far from Baiyue Island for many days appeared. She cursed, "That bastard is finally making a move. I'm almost suffocating." This figure was curvaceous in front and back. It was the ghost who was cultivating in the Emperor's Snail Palace. Although there were ghost cultivators in the Three-Realm Island, they were all in the Constellation Realm. They weren't far from Baiyue Island. If they wanted to hide here, the cultivators of the Three-Realm Island would be in danger. Therefore, when Lu Yi decided on the plan to deal with Baiyue Island, he called Spectre back. Of course, Ghost was not happy. She was very happy cultivating with Bai Lu in the Huang Luo Palace. How could she be willing to come out and get involved in these troublesome matters? After being beaten up, he became obedient. In the past, before Lu Yi had evolved into Yu Yao, she could already fight Ghost to a draw. Now that Lu Yi had evolved into Yu Yao, Ghost was no match for her. Looking in the direction of Baiyue Island, Spectre took out a blue sea snail and placed it by her mouth. Magic power flowed freely as she gently blew into it. The void in front of her twisted and turned into a door. In front of the Emperor Snail Palace's Emperor Snail Palace, He Baichuan led the 500 constellations of the Three-Realm Island and waited for many days. The moment the door opened, he suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "The time has come. Today is the day that the Three-Realm Island becomes famous. Whether we can establish ourselves in the Myriad Sea in the future depends on today's battle. Everyone, follow me and kill the enemy. We will not rest until we defeat Baiyue Island. We will not rest until we defeat Baiyue Island." The 500 constellations roared in unison. The constellations had never even met anyone from Baiyue Island before, let alone had any personal grudges. However, ever since Baiyue Island's Yu Yao ambushed Old Tang and intercepted Luan Xiaoa and He Baichuan, the grudges between the two islands had been formed. This was because if Baiyue Island's operation had succeeded that day, not only would Tang Jun have died, but Luan Xiaoa and He Baichuan would also have met with misfortune. Without Yu Yao's protection, how could they survive on the Myriad Sea? They would only become a tree without roots, a river without a source, drifting about on the Myriad Sea. They came from a remote galaxy like the Jade Snail Palace. There was not even a single sun in the entire galaxy. They longed for the wonders of the universe. Now that they had finally come out and arrived at this prosperous place, they had coincidentally occupied a spiritual island. How could they allow others to seize it and chase them away? Guarding the island was self-preservation. Counterattacking was a way to establish a foothold. They wanted to establish a foothold on this complicated Myriad Sea because only then would their galaxy have a brighter future. If Baiyue Island wanted to attack the Three-Realm Island, they would become enemies that would not rest until they were dead. He Baichuan was the first to rush out of the door. Following closely behind him were figures that did not hesitate and were filled with murderous intent. In just a short moment, the figures gathered in front of the Emperor Snail Palace had all rushed out and revealed themselves on the deserted island. According to the previous arrangement, the Tiger Shark warships were launched one after another, and the Kindred Spirit Array discs were activated one after another, forming one formation after another. Under He Baichuan's lead, they aggressively charged towards Baiyue Island. Only two figures remained on the deserted island. One was Spectre, who had blown the Azure Sea Conch, and the other was the weak old Tang. The two of them were not qualified to participate in this kind of battle, so they could only watch from afar. Old Tang suddenly extended a hand toward Spectre. Spectre blinked. What? Give it to me. Old Tang looked at her expressionlessly. Spectre turned her head away. What is it? I don't understand. Old Tang said slowly, You should know that I'm not the one who wants this. Luya told me to ask you for it. It's fine if you don't give it to me, but don't cry if he comes looking for you himself. You think I'm afraid of him? Spectre was like a cat whose fur had exploded. She jumped up and shouted, How long has it been since he became a Yu Yao? If he comes looking for me, I'll beat him up. Old Tang looked at her expressionlessly. Spectre suddenly felt a little guilty, but she still refused to admit it. I'll return to the Emperor's Snail Palace now. Let's see how he comes looking for me. Old Tang said, Take a guess. Is the Merfolk clan closer to you or to him? So what if you hide in the Emperor's Snail Palace? You'll still be caught and beaten up. Spectre's eyes twitched. She thought about the consequences of hiding in the Emperor's Snail Palace now, but in the end, she didn't dare to leave. She reluctantly took out the Azure Sea Conch and slapped it heavily on Tang Jun's hand. I'll give it to you. How stingy. I'm just going to play with it for a few days. He's too suspicious of me. He doesn't trust me at all. I've known him for so many years in vain. Tang Jun put the Azure Sea Conch away. Don't you know whether you're trustworthy or not? If she was really trustworthy, Luya wouldn't have told him to take back the Azure Sea Conch. After all, this thing was the link between the Three-World Island and the Emperor's Snail Palace. It was best to keep it in the hands of one of their own. The Azure Sea Conch played an important role in their successful surprise attack on Baiyue Island. Although Luya's small flower realm was convenient, its capacity was limited. He had experimented with it when he was in the 9 states. If he only took in lunar mansions, his small flower realm could take in at most 800 people. However, if he wanted to take in Yu Yao, this number would be greatly reduced. To put it simply, the stronger the cultivator, the greater the burden on the small flower realm, and the fewer people it could take in. Thus, he couldn't take in all of the Three-World Islands cultivators into his small flower realm. He only took 500 lunar mansions and 3 Yu Yao with him. This was practically the limit of the small flower realm's capacity. As for He Baichuan and the other 500 lunar mansions, Lu Yi had already sent them to the Merfolk clan's territory through the Azure Sea Conch's portal. They were gathered in front of the Heavenly Conch Palace, awaiting orders. Spectre blew the Azure Sea Conch here and opened the portal. He Baichuan's troops could directly descend here. No one would have thought that the Three-World Island would attack Baiyue Island from here. After all, this place was too close to Baiyue Island, and there was no way to hide. Once a large group of cultivators appeared, Baiyue Island could quickly react. However, with the convenience provided by the Azure Sea Conch, the Three-World Island was able to accomplish the impossible. On Baiyue Island, formation bases were destroyed, and the island's protective formation was shaken. This was a huge commotion. Through the spread of some scheming people, the news quickly spread. Baiyue Island was under attack. The battle for a high-class spiritual island had begun. The cultivators of Baiyue Island had occupied Baiyue Island for 800 years. As a high-class spiritual island, it was considered famous in the entire 10,000 Form Sea. Thus, when this news spread, countless cultivators rushed over from all over to see what was going on. It wasn't just the lunar mansions. Many of the spiritual islands Yu Yao personally moved out as well. It wasn't that they really liked to watch a show. Rather, in the entire 10,000 Form Sea, a battle for a high-class spiritual island was rare. Every time a battle for a high-class spiritual island broke out, it would at least represent a clash between cultivators from 2 different galaxies. The Yu Yao came to watch the battle mainly to see the performance of the attackers and the defenders. Through this kind of battle, they could see their own shortcomings. If there were mistakes, they could fix them. If there were mistakes, they could be crowned. Many people were trying to find out which force was attacking Baiyue Island this time. This was because a battle like this had never happened before. In the past battles for high-class spiritual islands, there would always be some clues before the battle. There would always be some small skirmishes between the two forces. When the conflict escalated, it would lead to the final battle for the spiritual island. However, this time, there wasn't even the slightest bit of news. A high-class spiritual island that had been in operation for 800 years was suddenly attacked. This was what shocked and puzzled many Yu Yao. For many Yu Yao who had been overseeing the 10,000 Forms Sea all year round, they were more or less aware of Baiyue Island's background. Baiyue Island wasn't the strongest among all the high-class spiritual islands, but it was definitely not the weakest either. After 800 years of operation, the protective formation of the island was incomparably sturdy. It was almost impossible for a single force to forcefully attack it. End of chapter. Chapter 1734. The Yu Yao who went to watch the battle wanted to know who was fighting against Baiyue Island this time, and what were their chances of winning. Or was it just some hot-headed people who started this war? At the same time, in a palace on Myriad Island, Xingsu Yuancheng, whom Tang Jun had met before, was standing respectfully in a spacious hall with his head bowed as he reported the news he had received. After a long while, a voice came from the depths of the hall. He's overestimating himself. Let him do as he pleases. Understood. Yuancheng replied, bowed, and retreated. Judging from the ancestor's words, he wasn't worried about Baiyue Island at all. If the ancestor wasn't worried, why should he be? After all, the ancestor hadn't even thought of releasing his divine sense to investigate the situation on Baiyue Island. No wonder the ancestor didn't think much of the Three Realms cultivators. As expected, they came from a remote place. They were short-sighted and arrogant. Did they really think that a high-grade spirit island was so easy to capture? After suffering a great loss this time, they would definitely behave themselves in the future. 500 kilometers away from Baiyue Island, two figures stood side by side. They were the first two Yu Yao to arrive after the battle broke out. They were none other than Four Corner Island. One was Zhou Chuang, who had separated from Lu Yi not long ago, and the other was Kong Cheng from the Indefinite Star System. Four Corner Island still had two Yu Yao who hadn't come. It wasn't that they didn't want to come, but they had to leave someone behind to guard their home. Four Corner Island was only a middle-grade spirit island, so its protective formation wasn't too strong. The reason why news of the battle on Baiyue Island had spread so quickly was because Four Corner Island had secretly promoted it. It was Lu Yi who had asked Zhou Chuang to help. Only by having more Yu Yao come to watch the battle and personally witness how Baiyue Island was captured would the world realize the strength of the Three Realms Island. Only then would the cultivators of the Three Realms be able to establish themselves on the Three Realms Island in the future. Lu Yi felt that one battle was enough for a battle of this scale. Therefore, the bigger the commotion, the better it would be for his side. 500 kilometers away, Kong Cheng and Zhou Chuang stared blankly at each other. Both of them had incredulous expressions on their faces. The corners of Kong Cheng's eyes twitched as he asked in shock, "How did they do it?" At this moment, under his observation, Baiyue Island's protective formation was clearly damaged. Its defense was greatly reduced, and it was chaotic inside. At least 3 places were in the midst of fierce battles. Without a doubt, this meant that the Three-World Island had already entered the island without completely breaking through the island's protective formation. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. I don't know. Zhou Chuang shook his head. Kong Cheng looked at Zhou Chuang speechlessly. How could you not know? You were the one who cooperated with Lu Yi. Zhou Chuang really didn't know. He couldn't understand the situation in front of him. After all, he hadn't been separated from Lu Yi for long. How did he do it? Although he had cooperated with Lu Yi to kill Chu Zhu, what did Chu Zhu's death have to do with the current situation? He couldn't possibly say that Lu Yi had disguised herself as Chu Zhu and sneaked into Baiyue Island, right? How stupid were the cultivators of the 100 Yu to allow a disguised Yu Yao to sneak in? What's more, even if Lu Yi had the ability to disguise himself, it wouldn't be that easy for him to sneak in. Taking a step back, if Lu Yi really did sneak in, how did he bring his people in? No one could explain all these inexplicable things. The only thing Kang Cheng and Zhou Chuang knew was that the 100 Yu Island was in trouble this time. Now that the enemy had breached the island's protective formation, the island's protective formation had lost its advantage. The cultivators of both sides could only fight on the island. Regardless of whether the three world islands suffered any losses in this battle, the 100 Yu Island would definitely suffer great losses. Figures quickly rushed over from all directions. They all stood a few 100 kilometers away and watched from afar. These were all people who had rushed over to watch the battle after receiving the news. They were secretly shocked. How did the battle escalate to the extent of fighting on the island so soon after it began? Soon, a large group of cultivators entered the field of vision of the spectators. The one in the lead was a late-stage Yu Yao cultivator. Behind him, a total of 20 Tiger Shark battleships moved side by side. Behind them, close to 100 battleships with different postures rushed towards the 100 Yu Island like whales swallowing the world. "They're from the three-world island," someone cried out in alarm. At a time like this, only cultivators who belonged to both sides would gather and charge into the battlefield. No one else had the right to join in. The reason they knew they were from the three-world island was because the Four Corners solar system had secretly spread the news about the three-world island. At the same time, they also revealed the grudge between the three-world island and Baiyue Island, letting everyone know the origin of this war. The three-world island had gained some fame recently because it was the second deserted island to be revived after the Peerless Island had been revived several years ago. It had even transformed into a high-grade spiritual island. On the myriad form C, there were occasional cases of spiritual islands being revived. However, it was very rare for spiritual islands to transform into high-grade or high-grade spiritual islands like the Peerless Island and the Three-World Island. The Peerless Island had fallen, while the Three-World Island was rising. Many Yu Yao had heard about the awkward situation the Three-World Island was in. The 100 Yu Yao cultivators wanted to take over the Three-World Island and ambush their Yu Yao. Now that the Three-World Island had retaliated, it was only natural. After all, cultivators enjoyed killing. If you attacked me, I would naturally return the favor. However, the many Yu Yao cultivators couldn't figure out how the Three-World Island was so far away from here. Where had this group of Three-World Island cultivators come from? Why hadn't there been any warning beforehand? What was even more inconceivable was that the Three-World Island had actually split up their forces. The current chaos on the 100 Yu Island was only caused by a portion of the Three-World Island cultivators. There was still a portion of them rushing to the battlefield. If the 100 Yu Island's protective formation hadn't been damaged, this group of cultivators wouldn't have been able to do anything. The 100 Yu Island wouldn't even need to wait for them to approach the main island. They would be able to make use of the island's protective formation to defeat them. However, the current situation was too complicated. No matter how experienced the Yu Yao was, she couldn't predict the direction of this battle. While the 503 world mansions led by He Baichuan were rushing toward the 100 Yu Island, the Three-World Island was also being attacked by powerful enemies. When the planetary ships were 150 kilometers away from the Three-World Island, they slowed down. On the leading planetary ship, Yu Yao, who was in charge of this battle, looked toward the Three-World Island with a grave expression. However, all she could see was a dense fog. She couldn't see the situation on the island at all. Ever since the fog had spread and covered the entire Spirit Island, this situation had been maintained. No one knew what was going on inside the Three-World Island. What puzzled this Yu Yao was that the Three-World Island should have reacted by now. Her fleet had already arrived at this location. However, the Three-World Island didn't react at all. It was as if they hadn't noticed their arrival. This was clearly abnormal. This Yu Yao instantly imagined how the Three-World Island was filled with traps, waiting for them to take the initiative to fall into them. However, The news she received was that the three-world island had sent several Yu Yao and 500 lunar mansions to attack the 100 Yu island. Therefore, the three-world island before them only had one Yu Yao and a few hundred lunar mansions guarding the main island. This bit of defensive strength was still insufficient. The fog that covered the island was obviously just a show. This further confirmed the fact that the three-world island didn't have enough defensive strength. After pondering for a moment, this Yu Yao gave the order to attack. No matter what kind of dragon's lair or tiger's den was up ahead, they would know once they attacked. In a battle between cultivators, strength was the most important thing. She didn't believe that with so many people she brought, they couldn't take down the three-world island. The attack began. The three-world island didn't react at all. They didn't even retaliate. Only the defensive formations silently endured the attacks. When the fleet was about 100 miles away, an unexpected scene occurred. The defensive formation of the three-world island was broken. Up until now, the attacking fleet hadn't seen any signs of retaliation. The leader of the fleet, Yu Yao, was at a loss. What was going on? If the three-world island had retaliated, that would be normal. However, the current situation was very strange. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. He wondered if there was no one left on the three-world island. However, she subconsciously felt that this was impossible. This was a high-grade spirit island. Which cultivator would be so careless as to not set up any defenses? Allowing others to attack? After thinking for a moment, she made some arrangements. Immediately, tiger shark battleships spread out in all directions, charging into the three-world island from all directions and disappearing into the thick fog. Soon news came back. The three-world island was empty. There wasn't even anything of value left. On the entire spirit island, there was only one formation in operation. Moreover, it had been broken through. The leader of the fleet, Yu Yao's eyes twitched. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After such a long time, they were actually fighting a battle of wits and strength on an empty island? The cultivators of the three-world island were quite tactful. They probably knew that they couldn't defend the island, so they retreated in advance? This made the invading cultivators wild with joy. Before this operation, although they thought that taking over the three-world island wouldn't be a problem, they would have to pay a price. Some unlucky cultivators might even die in battle. However, now, they had taken over a high-grade spirit island without paying a price. This was a great bargain. Let's go to the island. The leader of the fleet, Yu Yao, immediately gave the order. If they didn't take what was given to them by the heavens, they would be punished instead. No matter what, they couldn't let go of this high-grade spirit island. This way, their force would be able to take over a high-grade spirit island. Originally, their spirit island was only a middle-grade spirit island. Compared to a high-grade spirit island, there was a huge difference. This was especially so for a huge spirit island like the Three-Realm Island. Not only could they allow their own cultivators to stay and cultivate, they could even form partnerships with businesses from various factions. In the future, they would be able to earn a lot of money. Yu Yao, as the person in charge, would undoubtedly benefit the most. For a moment, Yu Yao couldn't help but think of the beautiful future. She almost couldn't hold back her laughter. Following his command, the constellation mansions that came with him all landed on the island and entered. They could feel the huge difference between the three-world island and the main island. The constellation mansions were also happy because in such a cultivation environment, their cultivation speed would increase by a lot, and they would be able to save a lot of spiritual jades. End of chapter. Chapter 1735. On the three-world island, Yu Yao's thoughts were running wild. Even with Yu Yao's peak state of mind, the leading cultivator couldn't help but feel a little smug. He felt that his luck was off the charts to have encountered such a good thing. In his joy, he didn't forget to send a message to Yu Huan. There is no one in Three-World Island. I have already conquered this island. No matter what, Yu Huan had sent him a message earlier. He had to accept this favor. When he returned, he would share some of the benefits with him. When Yu Huan received the message, he exploded. He didn't even bother replying because he already knew that there was no one in Three World Island. The remaining cultivators of Three World Island were now approaching Bayue Island. They were about to attack Bayue Island's defensive array. Bayue Island had been established for 800 years. It had never faced such internal and external troubles. No matter what, he couldn't understand what the people of Three World Island were thinking. Even if Bayue Island provoked them, they wouldn't give up on Three World Island and attack with all their might. In comparison, Three World Island was undoubtedly more valuable than Bayue Island. Although they were both high-grade spiritual islands, the sizes of these two spiritual islands were completely different. Moreover, why were the cultivators of Three World Island so confident that they could conquer Bayue Island? They had already lost Three World Island. If they couldn't conquer Bayue Island, they wouldn't even have a foothold in the Myriad Manifestation Sea. Were the people of the Three World Island all crazy? Naturally, they weren't crazy. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't have made such an extreme decision. They completely gave up on Three World Island's defense. They only used the bewildering array to conceal the situation inside. They used the deep-sea snail and little flower realm to divert the cultivators of Three World Island. They attacked Bayue Island with all their might. This decision was made by Lu Yi. This was because he wasn't afraid of losing Three World Island. The success of Three World Island and Unparalleled Island came from the little constellation hall. As long as this treasure was still in his hands, even if Three World Island was lost, it wouldn't be a big deal. At most, they could find another deserted island. Therefore, to others, it was necessary to protect their own spiritual island. However, Lu Yi didn't have such concerns. To him, offense was the best defense. When he proposed this during the meeting of the Yu Yao of Three World Island, everyone disagreed. However, they were persuaded by him in the end. Among the Yu Yao of the Three World Island, Lu Ye's cultivation was the lowest, but he carried the most weight. If he insisted on something, the others naturally couldn't oppose him too strongly. Moreover, Old Tang had been ambushed and almost died, which was indeed infuriating. In addition, Lu Ye's deployment was very reasonable, so the chances of taking down Bayue Island were very high. Thus, this proposal was approved. This led to today's battle against Bayue. Unlike Lu Yi, who was relaxed, the people from Three World Island felt that there was no way out. After all, Three World Island was most likely going to be lost. As such, they had to take down Bayue to make up for their losses. Under He Baichuan's command, 20 Tigerhawk warships and over 100 formations formed by cultivators of the three realms approached Bayue Island. Lu Yi and the others were under tremendous pressure. In the three array foundation halls of Bayue Island, there was at least one Yu Yao overseeing them. They had over 100 constellations under them. Such a force was actually not weak. However, this was the enemy's territory after all. Moreover, there were close to 2,000 cultivators on Bayue Island. One could imagine how much pressure the cultivators of the three realms were facing by dividing their forces to attack the three array foundation halls. It could be said that the cultivators of the three realms in each array foundation hall were facing enemies that were several times more than their own. If it wasn't for the array formation protecting the hall itself, they would have already suffered losses under such a great disparity in forces. In such a situation, even Lu Yi didn't dare to show himself easily. While Three World Island was burning their boats, Bayue Island was also fighting with their backs against the wall. Since the enemy had already entered their territory, who would dare to not fight with their lives on the line? The three array foundation halls where the cultivators of Three World Island were hiding were completely surrounded. Countless attacks bombarded them from all directions, causing the halls to tremble. Yu Huan's eyes were bloodshot. At this moment, he only hated Lu Yu and Chu Zhu for setting up the arrays in the halls so sturdy that they couldn't break through in a short period of time. However, thinking back, this sturdiness was exactly what he had requested. After all, the array foundation halls were too important to a spiritual island. Naturally, they had to be as sturdy as possible. He felt bitter in his heart. He didn't expect that the arrays that he had painstakingly set up would be useless to him. Instead, they were helping the enemy. Of course, if there was enough time, the arrays in the array foundation halls wouldn't be able to withstand the powerful attacks of Bayue Island. At that time, without the protection of the arrays, the 100 or so cultivators in each hall wouldn't be able to withstand the fury of Bayue Island's cultivators. Under the premise that there was a huge difference in numbers, they would probably be wiped out very quickly. However, how could they have so much time to squander? The arrangements of Three World Island were linked together. In this battle, Bayue Island was completely led by the nose. Island Lord Yu, the enemy's battleships and arrays are 200 miles away. They are about to attack. Amidst the chaos, someone hurriedly rushed to Yu Huan and reported the situation. Yu Huan's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He turned his head and looked outside the island. As expected, He Baichuan's troops were already in an attacking posture. 20 Tiger Shark battleships. The scale wasn't big, but it definitely wasn't small either. In addition to the hundreds of arrays, this was a force that couldn't be underestimated. Especially now that the 4 array foundations had been destroyed, Yu Huan really didn't know how much power his island's protective array could unleash. Junior Meng, Junior Meng. He hurriedly shouted. Junior Meng, who was leading people to attack one of the array foundation halls, quickly rushed over. Yu Huan hurriedly said, quickly get people to set up defenses. Also, make sure that the remaining 4 array foundation halls are safe. The array bases could not be destroyed anymore. Now that there were only 4 left, they could still maintain the operation of the island's protective array. If 1 or 2 more array bases were destroyed, the island's protective array would collapse on its own before the enemy could attack. Yes. Junior Meng received the order and immediately ordered everyone to leave with a large group of people. The pressure on Lu Yi and the others was greatly reduced. Soon, rumbling sounds could be heard. He Baichuan's 20 Tiger Shark battleships began to attack Bayue Island. Among the arrays formed by the cultivators of the Three World Island, nearly half of them coordinated their attacks. The reason why only half of them attacked was mainly because the other half's arrays weren't suitable for long-range attacks. Moreover, they had other missions. Even though there was a distance of 200 kilometers between them, when the attacks landed on the island's protective Grand Formation, ripples spread out in all directions. If it weren't for Junior Marshal Sister Meng leading people to the 4 intact formation bases in time to stabilize the Grand Formation, it would have been completely destroyed in just a few rounds of such attacks. After 3 rounds of attacks, the array was still maintained. However, its strength had clearly weakened. This was the result of incomplete array foundations. If the 8 array foundations were intact and there were enough people to control and maintain them, then He Baichuan's troops wouldn't have any effect at all. Then, Bayue Island's counterattack came. A well-set spiritual island didn't only have an indestructible protective array. Around the spiritual island, there would also be a large number of defensive arrangements. These arrangements could all be used to counterattack the enemy. For example, some offensive formations that used magic treasures as the core of the formation. If one had enough money, they could even place the Tiger Shark battleships as the core of the formation. This way, they could maximize the power of the Tiger Shark battleships. The cultivators of Bayue Island had occupied this place for 800 years. Even if they had never experienced such a battle before, they would still have many of the necessary arrangements. At this moment, under Junior Meng's coordination, the counterattacks were launched one after another. He Baichuan's troops were unmoved. The dozens of formations that didn't attack previously all activated the power of the formation. As the light shone brightly, the different forms of the formations seemed to come alive and turned into a solid defense. The layers of defense formed by the formation were like an iron wall. They blocked the attacks from the spiritual island for the people who were in charge of the attack. After a round of defense, no one was injured. Their own side's attack was launched again. The attack and defense battle outside the island started 200 miles away. Before Bayue's protective array was completely destroyed, He Baichuan's troops couldn't get any closer. This was because it was too risky. Moreover, they couldn't get onto the island even if they got closer. More and more cultivators came to watch. A battle for a high-class spiritual island seemed to have attracted the attention of the entire Wanxiang Sea. After all, it wasn't common. Many cultivators had never seen such a battle on a high-class spiritual island. In comparison, the battles between middle-class spiritual islands and low-class spiritual islands that they had seen before were like children playing house. While the battle outside the island was in full swing, Lu Yi led Ma Shangxi out of a formation base hall on the island. Just now, when Baiyue Island's forces were concentrated on the island, the 3 formation base halls were suppressed to the point that they couldn't fight back. They could only rely on the formation of the halls to fight back. However, the appearance of He Baichuan's troops attracted almost half of Baiyue Island's forces. Lu Yi could clearly feel that the pressure on this side had weakened. Their chance was here. Open a gap in the formation. After 3 breaths, everyone will attack. Lu Yi ordered as he walked forward. In this hall, more than 100 people accepted the order in unison. When Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi walked to the front of the hall, the cultivator in charge of maintaining the formation immediately opened a gap. This was an extremely risky move because outside the hall, the enemy's attacks were endless. If the formation didn't have a gap, they could still struggle at death's door. However, once a gap was opened, it would be impossible to close it again. This was also the reason why Lu Yi ordered everyone to attack after 3 breaths. If they didn't attack, once the formation of the hall was broken, they would be sitting ducks. Now that the gap had been opened, Lu Yi turned around. Ma Shangxi's expression was ferocious. With a resolute expression, he charged out through the gap. In the next instant, countless attacks landed on his body. Even though he was a peak stage Yu Yao, his flesh was lacerated and blood splattered everywhere. His entire body exploded with a loud bang. The Yu Yao in charge of leading the attack on this hall was Baiyue Island's Su Yuming. He was a late-stage Yu Yao and was one of the 4 remaining Yu Yao. He had received Yu Huan's death order. No matter what, he had to block the enemy inside the hall. Whoever dared to show their face was to be killed. He had thought that since the enemy was hiding inside the hall, it would be a long battle. Who would have thought that he would actually kill one of them? Moreover, it was a Yu Yao. End of chapter. Chapter 1736. Killing one of the enemy's Yu Yao was a great achievement. Su Yuming couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. It was during this moment of daze that an unforeseen event suddenly occurred. A dazzling blood-red light blossomed. Immediately after, it expanded with a bang and rapidly spread out in all directions. Su Yuming's eyes narrowed. At the same time, he hurriedly retreated and shouted, "Blood arts!" He finally understood that Yu Yao wasn't dead. After her body exploded, there was no sign of Yu Yao dying. The other party had taken the opportunity to use a blood art. Moreover, judging from the speed at which the blood-red light spread, the other party's attainment in blood arts was clearly extremely high. His reaction was fast, so he avoided being enveloped by the sea of blood. However, the constellations under his command didn't have the ability to react. Of the 2,000 cultivators on Baiyue Island, half of them were currently deployed to maintain the island's protective formation and counterattack He Baichuan's troops. The remaining 1,000 cultivators were surrounding the 3 formation foundation halls. Thus, there were 300 to 400 constellations on this side. When Ma Shangxi's sea of blood spread out, these 300 to 400 constellations were immediately enveloped. Not a single one was left out. This scene made Su Yuming's eyes almost pop out of their sockets. In the next instant, he sensed that the auras of the constellations in the sea of blood were beginning to disappear. Moreover, the speed was extremely fast. One after another, it was as if an ancient vicious beast had awakened in the sea of blood and was devouring the lives of the cultivators on his side. He immediately realized that this was Lu Ye's doing, because only with Yu Yao's help would the constellations die so quickly. For a moment, he was filled with grief and indignation. Fortunately, the cultivators on Baiyue Island weren't idiots. Although most of them appeared to be very flustered when they suddenly fell into the sea of blood, they quickly circulated their power and stirred up the sea of blood. Ma Shangxi's strength was indeed very strong, and the might of the sea of blood was also extremely impressive. However, it was impossible for him to trap 300 to 400 star mansions by himself. If the star mansions were to stir the sea of blood like this, it would cause the sea of blood to become turbulent and consume his strength. It would only take a moment to break this sea of blood. More than 100 cultivators of the three realms charged out of the hall together. Many cultivators formed a formation using the kindred spirit connection disc, forming groups of 3 to 5. Under the guidance of Ma Shangxi, they hunted down the enemies in the sea of blood. Not to mention Lu Yi, who had fought his way out of the hall with Ma Shangxi, was also doing as he pleased in the sea of blood. With his current strength, how could the constellations of Baiyue stop him? With each passing breath, a cultivator was dying. Veins bulged on Su Yuming's forehead as he had escaped from the blood sea's range in advance. He madly urged his power to blast towards the blood sea, wanting to cooperate with the constellations on his side to break through the blood sea as soon as possible and save them. However, after only 3 breaths of time, he revealed a look of despair. Because in the short span of 3 breaths, the number of constellations that had perished in the blood sea had already reached 50. Although the massive sea of blood was turbulent from the impact, it could still hold on for 7 or 8 breaths. 50 people in 3 breaths of time. In another 7 to 8 breaths of time, wouldn't that mean more than 100 people would die? There were only 300 to 400 constellations here. Su Yuming could not accept such a huge loss in battle. Therefore, he only hesitated for a moment before diving into the sea of blood. Just now, he had clearly avoided the blood sea's envelopment. However, in order to break through the blood sea as soon as possible, he had no choice but to take the initiative to dive into it. How ironic and helpless was that? However, only by diving into the depths of the blood sea could he have the confidence to break through the blood sea in a shorter time and save the cultivators on his side. Su Yuming was indeed a late-stage Yu Yao cultivator. After entering the blood sea, his magic power fluctuated violently, causing the entire blood sea to boil. Lu Yi, who was wantonly killing enemies in the blood sea, heard Ma Shangxi's voice. "Holy sage, I can't hold on any longer." It was not that he was not strong enough. It was just that there were too many cultivators fighting in the blood sea at this moment. Excluding the 2 Yu Yao cultivators, Lu Yi and Su Yuming, there were hundreds of constellations. The blood sea was bearing the brunt of these battles. The fact that he could hold on for a few breaths of time was already a reflection of his strong foundation. When Lu Yi heard this, he immediately stabilized his body. In the next instant, he used the blood art. An even thicker blood color spread out from his body and spread in all directions. Not only that, but a figure in the blood sea also used the blood race's secret technique under Lu Ye's voice transmission. Lan Qiue. Although she only had the cultivation of an early-stage constellation cultivator, the special nature of the blood race's blood art was enough to ensure that she could play a role in such a battlefield. Su Yuming's judgment was not wrong. If this was just a simple blood art, he could indeed break it faster if he took the initiative to throw himself into it and save the constellations under his command. However, he did not know that this was not a simple blood art. This was a blood race's secret technique performed by a peak Yu Yao cultivator. On the surface, there was not much difference between the two. Bystanders could not even tell the difference. However, the biggest difference was that the blood sea of the blood race could merge and strengthen each other. This error in judgment was enough to be fatal. Therefore, his expression quickly turned to one of astonishment. This was because the blood sea, which was clearly unstable and was about to be broken, suddenly became much more stable. Immediately after, a huge burst of energy erupted from the depths of the blood sea. This stability became even more obvious. Lu Yi had exploded a drop of his precious blood. He had no choice but to explode it. If he wanted to wipe out all the enemies trapped in the blood sea, he had to maintain the blood sea for a long time. However, even with his and Lan Qiue's secret assistance, the blood sea would not last long with so many people fighting in it. A drop of precious blood might only be able to maintain the blood sea for a few breaths of time, but it should be enough. He Baichuan's troops were attacking from the outside. If they wanted to quickly break through from the inside, they could only break through from this direction. However, if there were any fish that slipped through the net, their forces would not be able to gain the upper hand. At that time, the casualties would be great. It could be said that Lu Yi had planned to exterminate Su Yuming's troops from the very beginning. He and Ma Shangxi had to achieve the greatest results in the shortest time possible. Under the support of the precious blood, the Blood Sea indeed became more stable. Lu Yi turned to Ma Shangxi and instructed, "Keep an eye on that Yu Yao. Since she's back, don't leave." Originally, when Su Yuming escaped, Lu Yi felt that it was a pity. After all, the effects of killing a constellation lord and killing Yu Yao were different. In this kind of battlefield, if Yu Yao died, the enemy's morale would be greatly affected. He had originally planned to deal with the constellation lords in the Blood Sea first, then find a way to join forces with Ma Shangxi to kill Yu Yao. Who would have thought that she would actually turn back on her own accord? Lu Yi was very clear about Su Yuming's plan. It had to be said that this kind of method of being willing to risk danger for the constellation lords under his command was very admirable. However, admiration was admiration. Since they were enemies, there was no reason to be merciful. Ma Shangxi received the order and immediately rushed towards Su Yuming. Originally, he had to maintain the stability of the Blood Sea and assist the three world islands' constellation lords in killing the enemy. Hence, he could not move at all. However, the situation was different now. Lu Yi and Lan Qiue's Blood Sea had merged with the Blood Sea. In terms of maintaining the Blood Sea, Lu Yi would help to bear the pressure. The task of assisting in killing the enemy would be handed over to Lan Qiue. He could spare a portion of his strength to deal with Su Yuming and hold him back. Outside Baiyue Island, the gazes of many cultivators who were watching the battle were all focused on the Sea of Blood. The onlookers could see more clearly than the players involved. Yu Huan and the others might not have noticed the changes here because they were also fiercely fighting on their own battlefields, but the spectators could see everything clearly. No one knew what was going on in the Blood Sea. Furthermore, the island's protective array isolated them, so they could not sense it clearly. They could only vaguely sense that there were life auras constantly withering in the Blood Sea. Everyone's expression changed. All the spectating cultivators realized that the battle in the Blood Sea would definitely be a decisive factor in this battle for the spiritual island. Whoever obtained victory in this battle would have the absolute advantage. Would it be the three-world island that came prepared, or the Baiyue Island that came with a strong foundation? No one knew. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen. In the Blood Sea, Su Yuming was entangled by Ma Shangxi. Even if he used all his strength, he could not break free. When he sensed the familiar auras around him vanishing, his heart was filled with fear. He suddenly realized that it was a mistake for him to barge into the Blood Sea. However, since things had already come to this, there was no use regretting it. Anger turned into flames that burned in his heart. Su Yuming's dermic powers fluctuated, and he actually forced Ma Shangxi to retreat. This did not mean that Ma Shangxi's abilities were inferior to his. It was just that the latter had expended a lot of energy when he was controlling the Blood Sea. Furthermore, Lu Yi had ordered him to keep Su Yuming busy. Now that the other party was about to fight to the death, Ma Shangxi naturally had to avoid him. If he was not careful, he would be dragged to the grave by the enemy. That would not be worth it. In the battlefield of the Blood Sea, Baiyue Island originally had the absolute advantage in terms of numbers. However, as time passed, this advantage was gradually narrowed. Then, it was wiped out and turned into a disadvantage. The army was defeated like a landslide. How could the Baiyue Island cultivators have a good ending when Lu Yi, a Yu Yao, was involved in the battle of the constellation cultivators? The Blood Sea's environment was not conducive to the Baiyue Island cultivators. Those who were targeted by Lu Yi would not survive a single strike. The Baiyue Island cultivators had been entrenched here for 800 years. It could not be said that they had not experienced any battles, but they had never experienced a battle of this scale. On the other hand, the Three Realms cultivators who came from the Jade Conch and Green Dawn Dao world might lack experience in this kind of battle. However, the Nine Continents cultivators had been through many battles. A battle of this scale was simply a small scene compared to the Nine Continents army's counterattack on the Insect Clan's Great Mystic Realm and the expedition to the Blood Refinement world. Moreover, the 9 continents cultivators were all fearless and their battle style was savage. Under their influence, even if the Jade Conch and Green Dawn Dao world cultivators lacked experience, they were still motivated. Therefore, although they were far inferior in terms of numbers, when Ma Shangxi rushed out of the Array Foundation Hall and spread out the Blood Sea, the Baiyue Island cultivators were destined to perish. After a few breaths, the Baiyue Island cultivators in the Blood Sea were completely annihilated. Su Yuming was in even more danger. Originally, he was fighting alone with Ma Shangxi. When the latter temporarily avoided the attack, he still appeared to be ferocious. However, when Lu Yi withdrew her hand and the master and servant attacked together, Su Yuming completely lost the power to resist. End of this chapter. Chapter 1737. Outside the Jade Conch realm, Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi had worked together to kill many Yu Yao of the filthy race. Even peak Yu Yao couldn't escape death. Although Su Yuming was strong, he couldn't withstand the combination of the mountain blade and Ma Shangxi's blood-tracing art. Being trapped in the Blood Sea was already extremely disadvantageous for Su Yuming. Now that he was facing the combined assault of the vicious master and servant, he couldn't resist at all. After fighting for only a short while, his body was covered in wounds so deep that his bones could be seen. However, these wounds did not show any signs of healing. There was a strange energy lingering around the wounds, preventing his powerful regenerative abilities from taking effect. Ma Shangxi also used the blood-tracing technique in an extremely despicable manner, causing his wounds to spurt blood. Su Yuming knew that this was a disaster. At this critical juncture of life and death, he calmed his mind, his eyes filled with determination. Even if he died, he would drag someone down with him. Lu Yi, who was relatively weak, was undoubtedly his target. As he struggled, he tried his best to find an opportunity. However, to his despair, Lu Ye's figure drifted back and forth like a ghost. He had no chance at all. It had been quite some time since he had obtained the inheritance of the Yan Shi sweeping technique, and he had also experienced several great battles. Although Lu Yi didn't dare to say that he had perfected the technique to the point of perfection, but it was undoubtedly much better than his initial inexperience. Coupled with the Blood Sea's concealment, it would be strange if Su Yuming could grasp his movements. But he still forced himself to hold on, searching for the last possible chance. The opportunity had really come. In his perception, Lu Ye's aura was rapidly approaching. The moment Lu Yi drew near, Su Yuming's flickering flame of life suddenly became resplendent. His magic power surged wildly as he swung the magic weapon in his hand in Lu Ye's direction. He roared, "Let's die together." He poured all of his remaining strength into this attack. He didn't put up any defenses, so even if Lu Yi couldn't kill him, he would die at Ma Shangxi's hands. However, if he could kill Lu Yi, it would be worth it to die with him. He was only worried that Lu Yi would sense something was wrong and retreat. Lu Yi didn't retreat. Instead, he used the mountain blade to meet his opponent's full-powered attack. As their magic power collided, Su Yuming's eyes widened. It was as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. His face was filled with disbelief. In that instant, he realized that he wasn't a match for Lu Yi. How was this possible? He was at the late stage of Moon Jade Realm, while his opponent was only at the early stage. Even though he was at the end of his tether, his desperate attack was still not to be underestimated. How could his opponent's foundation be so strong? Before this, Lu Yi had only used the sweeping technique to constantly whittle away at his strength and fighting spirit. Therefore, Su Yuming had no way of determining the strength of Lu Ye's foundation until this final direct confrontation. While he was in shock, his magic power had already collapsed, and a huge force attacked him. Su Yuming's figure was unstable, and the magic weapon in his hand even flew out. Immediately after, a huge sun exploded, completely enveloping him. That sun was like a lotus, with countless petals spinning and dancing. Each petal was the ultimate condensation of Blade Aura. Tyrant Blade's third move, Lotus Sun. The eruption in that instant was extremely obvious. The cultivators watching the battle outside Baiyue Island all cried out in surprise. Everyone stared at the sea of blood, wanting to know what the final outcome would be. They could vaguely sense the presence of Yu Yao's death from the sea of blood. This undoubtedly meant that the battle on this battlefield was over. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the sea of blood quickly receded. Immediately after, a shocking scene appeared. In front of the ruined formation base hall, more than 100 figures stood in the air. With Tu Yu Yao in the lead, the rest of the cultivators had formed a formation, and their killing intent was dense. Apart from that, there were also several hundred broken corpses that had been enveloped by the sea of blood. The moment the sea of blood disappeared, those corpses fell down like raindrops. The entire world fell silent. Everyone looked at the falling corpses with trembling eyes. Someone recognized that one of them was Su Yuming, the late-stage Moonjade Realm cultivator of Baiyue Island. Even an expert like Su Yuming had died in battle. This undoubtedly meant that all the cultivators of Baiyue Island had been annihilated. How did they do it? Beside Zhou Chuang, the corners of Kong Cheng's eyes twitched. The difference in numbers was so great. Even if the three-world island had an extra Yu Yao, how could they have exterminated their enemies in such a battle without suffering any losses? Kong Cheng couldn't understand. If he and Zhou Chuang had led the same number of cultivators, they definitely wouldn't have achieved such a result. Even if they had won in the end, it would have been a Pyrrhic victory. On the other hand, the battle on the three-world island side had ended in just half a cup of tea's time. Senior Brother Su. In front of another formation base hall, a sorrowful cry rang out. It was Jiang En, one of the guardians of Baiyue Island. The Yu Yao of Baiyue Island came from the same galaxy, but they didn't come from the same realm. The situation was similar to that of the three-world island. Among the Yu Yao guardians, only Jiang En and Su Yuming came from the same realm. Their relationship was also the deepest. Now that she saw Su Yuming die in battle, she was naturally filled with grief and indignation. In fact, when he had sensed that Su Yuming's situation wasn't good, he had wanted to go and reinforce him. However, he also had his own mission. He had led hundreds of star mansions to trap Luan Xiao's forces. Every time he moved to reinforce them, Luan Xiao's forces would act as if they were about to charge out of the formation base hall. He couldn't move at all. In the end, he could only watch as Su Yuming's forces died in battle. After a sorrowful cry, he immediately turned his head. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Luan Xiao in the formation base hall. He gritted his teeth and growled, "I want all of you dead. I want to kill everyone on the three-world island." Luan Xiao only stared at him coldly. She said indifferently, "We didn't start this conflict. You started it. You brought it on yourselves." Jiang En was stunned for a moment. Then he became even more enraged. He roared furiously and madly channeled his magic power to attack the formation base hall, causing the formation base hall's formation to tremble. In front of another formation base hall, Yu Huan was also roaring furiously, "Break the formation for me." He was really anxious. This was because if they didn't break the formation base hall's formation quickly and get rid of the enemies inside, the situation on the Baiyue Island would only worsen. The battle for the spiritual island was split into 4 battlefields. 3 of them were the 3 formation base halls. The last one was the battlefield where He Baichuan's forces were at. Right now, the three-world island had opened a gap in one of the battlefields and achieved a perfect victory. However, in the overall situation, the three-world island was still at a disadvantage. This was because their opponents were still far ahead in terms of numbers. It wasn't easy for He Baichuan's forces to enter the island. They had to break the protective formation of the Baiyue Island to have a chance. Meanwhile, the three-world island cultivators led by Luan Xiao and Yen Miao were trapped in the 2 formation base halls. They had to rely on the formation to hold on. This was extremely risky. That was why Yu Huan was anxious. Lu Yi and the rest were equally anxious. Both sides wanted to gain the upper hand in the next battle. The three-world island won the first battle. However, if they didn't gain the upper hand in the next battle, they wouldn't be able to secure victory. That was why after Ma Shangxi kept the Blood Sea, Lu Yi had no intention of assisting Luan Xiao and Yen Miao. Instead, he led more than 100 people and charged out. He Baichuan's forces were the key to this battle. They had to get them into the island as soon as possible to increase their bargaining chip. In a battle involving thousands of people, Yu Yao was undoubtedly very useful. However, if they wanted to achieve a complete victory, they couldn't do without a large number of lunar mansions. This was especially true when the lunar mansions could use the twin chi-connected branches array disk to form a formation. Once a few lunar mansions formed a formation, they could almost act as Yu Yao. The twin chi-connected branches array disk had been circulating for many years. Its price was gradually dropping. At the Wanxiang Sea, it couldn't be said that every lunar mansion had one. At the very least, on the Baiyue Island, a few lunar mansions shared one. They could use the array disk to form a formation. The lunar mansions that were killed in the Blood Sea just now had all formed a formation. If the three-world island wanted to win, they had to do their best to close the gap between the enemy and their forces. Although this gap could never be closed, as long as He Baichuan's forces charged in, they could more or less recover some of their disadvantage. Moreover, the cultivators who were fighting He Baichuan's forces were the easiest to kill. This was because they had to maintain the formation for the counterattack, so they had to be extremely scattered. On the other hand, if Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi led reinforcements to Luan Xiaoa or Yan Miao, it wouldn't play a decisive role in the battle. When Lu Yi and the others moved, Yu Huan panicked. He gritted his teeth and roared, "How dare you!" But why would Lu Yi pay any attention to him? The Lunar Mansion's leaders charged towards the periphery of the Baiyue Island. Yu Huan was at a loss. For a moment, he didn't know whether to continue attacking Yan Miao's forces or to intercept Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi. In this moment of delay, Lu Yi had already charged to the front of a large counterattack formation. There were 20 lunar mansions gathered here. Some were responsible for injecting spiritual power into the large formation, some were responsible for activating the formation's power, and some were responsible for controlling the Dharma treasures in the center of the formation to defend against the enemy. Everyone had their own duties in an orderly manner. When Lu Yi suddenly charged over, these lunar mansions didn't react at all. They were still entangled with He Baichuan's forces outside the island. By the time they realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. Lu Ye's entire body was like a gust of wind, sweeping past the large formation. As his saber flashed past, screams rang out and blood splattered everywhere. His figure didn't stop at all. He charged straight ahead, leaving behind a mess. More than half of the 20 lunar mansions died in an instant. It really was like chopping melons and vegetables. Although the remaining people were still alive, they were all injured. The lunar mansions who were lucky enough to survive stood up in a daze. However, they were greeted by Ma Shangxi and more than 100 lunar mansions of the three realms, who had followed closely behind Lu Yi. After 2 rounds of attacks, not a single one of the 20 lunar mansions was left alive. Even the counterattack formation was destroyed. In front of them, Lu Yi was like an arrow that had left a bow. Everywhere he passed, a foul wind and a rain of blood was stirred up. The spectating cultivators were all dumbfounded. Even though they were a few hundred kilometers away, the cultivators could still sense that Lu Yi was only an early-stage lunar jade. But they had never seen such a savage early-stage lunar jade. End of chapter. Chapter 1738. The defensive arrangements of a spiritual island were generally divided into 2 types. The first type was the island's protective formation. This was the most reliable defense of every spiritual island. However, if an enemy attacked, it was impossible to just take a beating without retaliating. In this world, no matter how strong the protective formation was, it would not be able to withstand endless attacks. Therefore, other than the island's protective formation, every spiritual island had a counterattack arrangement. The island's protective formation was based on the various formation bases, while the counterattack arrangement was based on different formations. Regardless of the type, they were all arranged near the periphery of the spiritual island. Because it was near the periphery, the spectators were able to see the fight clearly. Lu Yi charged out from the main hall of the formation bases. His figure was like lightning as he swept past one formation after another. Wherever his blade went, nothing could stand in his way. The formations were destroyed and the cultivators of Baiyue were either injured or killed. Even if they were lucky enough to survive, they were torn to pieces by Ma Shangxi and the cultivators of the three realms. In a short span of 10 breaths, Lu Ye's figure traversed 50 miles and tore a huge hole in the outer defensive line of Baiyue Island. Just as he had expected, these cultivators were controlling the formations within the defensive line. Therefore, they were very scattered. Taking them by surprise was indeed a huge gain. However, after 50 miles, Lu Yi had no choice but to stop. With Yu Yao's body, it was indeed easy for her to kill the constellations. However, if she killed too many, it would still consume a lot of energy. No matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to completely penetrate the defensive line of Baiyue Island by himself. The reason why he was able to penetrate 50 miles was because the cultivators here were not prepared at all and were caught off guard by him. Now that the cultivators of Baiyue Island were prepared, it would not be easy to achieve the same results as before. At the very least, they could form a formation. Moreover, Yu Yao was overseeing this side. She was junior sister Meng, who had been called out by Yu Huan at the beginning of the battle. Since she was overseeing the defensive line, how could she watch as Lu Yi massacred her own constellations? Therefore, when she sensed that something was wrong, she immediately led a group of people to meet Lu Yi and stop him. After a short confrontation, Ma Shangxi led the cultivators of the three realms and rushed over. When junior sister Meng saw this, although she was unwilling, she could only withdraw and reorganize her forces. Lu Yi, Ma Shangxi, and the others met up again. Without stopping for a moment, they continued to push forward and destroy the enemy's defensive line. A moment later, junior sister Meng, who had reorganized her forces, returned to confront Lu Yi and the others. Baiyue Island had a total of 2,000 cultivators. In this battle, the total number of cultivators besieging the three formation foundation halls was around 1,000. The remaining 1,000 cultivators were arranged to guard the four formation foundation halls and the external defense line. There were about 100 people in each of the four array foundation halls, so there were about 400 people in total. Therefore, junior sister Meng could mobilize about 600 people. However, these 600 people were very scattered. Due to the long defensive line and the fact that Lu Yi had killed some of them, junior apprentice sister Meng could only mobilize about 300 people in a hurry. The other 300 were temporarily unable to move. After all, the island's guardian array was still intact, and they still had to defend it. On the surface, junior apprentice sister Meng's side had more people, but Lu Yi had 2 Yu Yaos. Neither side was inferior to her. Therefore, after the two sides clashed, they were evenly matched for a short time. When the battle between Lu Yi, Ma Shangxi, and junior apprentice sister Meng broke out, He Baichuan had already led his 500 subordinates to the gap in the defensive line. With a command, attacks that blotted out the sky and covered the earth bombarded the island's guardian array from the direction of the gap. The array was on the verge of collapse. Before this, they had already put a considerable burden on the island's guardian array. However, because of the enemy's counterattack, they could not unleash their full strength. Now, there was no need to worry. There was no need to deal with the enemy's counterattack. They only needed to attack the array fiercely, and the 500 cultivators fought with their lives on the line. Violent sounds rang out continuously, and the entire spiritual island was shaking. If not for the spiritual island on the 10,000 Elephant Sea being special, such a violent battle would have long been smashed to pieces. When the spectating cultivators saw this scene, they immediately understood that Baiyue's island's guardian array could not hold on. It was not that Baiyue was not strong enough, nor was it that the island's guardian array, which had been accumulating for 800 years, was weak. Instead, it was because the three-world island's attack rhythm was too perfect. The people of Baiyue Island were now being led by the nose. In this kind of battle, this was the most taboo. Yu Huan's ability to command a battle of this scale was too incompetent, but this was not his problem. After the conflict broke out, Lu Ye's arrangements were linked one after another, and he was forced to deal with them as they came. In just half a cup of tea's time, after another round of fierce attacks by He Baichuan's troops, the island's guardian array, which had protected Baiyue Island for 800 years, suddenly shattered. The moment the array shattered, all the cultivators of Baiyue felt their hearts skip a beat. A few Yuyaos even paled. Behind He Baichuan, the battle cries of the 500 lunar mansions pierced the clouds. Their killing intent was almost tangible. Under his command, they charged into the island. The path ahead was clear, and there were no more obstructions. On the battlefield where Lu Yi and the others were, junior martial sister Meng gritted her teeth and did her best to contend against Ma Shangxi. Lu Yi completely ignored her. It was not that he did not want to, but that he could not. After all, the number of lunar mansions on his side was much lower. Without him in the middle, many of his lunar mansions were bound to die. Thus, he could only think of a way to kill the enemy's lunar mansions and close the gap in their numbers. Moreover, to him, killing lunar mansions was undoubtedly much easier than killing Yuyaos. In this half a cup of tea's time, dozens of lunar mansions had died at his hands. When he had auctioned off the twin chi-linked branches formation disk in the lunar mansion's hall, Lu Yi knew that this thing would definitely change the situation in the myriad phenomenon sea. This was because the formation disk could allow certain lunar mansions with powerful foundations to contend with Yuyaos to a certain extent. However, he never expected that he would be restricted in this aspect one day. Under the formation of Baiyue Island's lunar mansions, it was not that easy for him to kill them. Killing more than 10 lunar mansions in half a cup of tea's time was already an extremely good result. At every moment, he had to face the siege of at least 7 or 8 formations. Faced with Lu Ye's threat, the Baiyue lunar mansions were clearly somewhat restrained in battle. This was because no one knew when he would suddenly attack. On the other hand, the cultivators of the 3 realms were full of vigor. As a result, although the Baiyue lunar mansions had the advantage in numbers, they were clearly at a disadvantage. When He Baichuan's troops broke through the island's protective formation, the Baiyue lunar mansion's fighting spirit was clearly greatly reduced, and the situation became even worse. Almost at the same time that the island's protective formation was broken, a powerful divine sense suddenly spread out from the direction of one of the formation foundation halls and spread throughout the entire spiritual island. Lu Yi sensed for a moment and immediately sensed that the source of this divine sense was Yu Huan. This fellow was clearly using divine sense to send a voice transmission and deploy something. As expected, following the fluctuation of the divine sense, many scattered cultivators on Baiyue Island immediately abandoned their original battlefield and rushed in one direction. Junior Martial Sister Yu, who was entangled with Ma Shangxi, also activated the power of a Dharma treasure. It released a bright light that disturbed Ma Shangxi's senses. She quickly retreated, and an abnormal red light appeared on her body. Without a doubt, she had activated some kind of escape technique and wanted to quickly leave the battlefield. Her actions were undoubtedly very wise, because Ma Shangxi's cultivation was actually higher than hers. Under normal circumstances, it would not be so easy for her to escape after being entangled by Ma Shangxi. She only had a chance to escape with the help of the Dharma treasure's interference for a moment. From this, it could be seen that junior martial sister Meng was also someone who had a lot of battle experience. While fleeing, she had also deliberately tried to sense Lu Ye's location. In this battlefield, only Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi could pose a threat to her. After escaping from Ma Shangxi, she naturally had to be on guard against Lu Yi. Lu Yi was dozens of miles away from her, fighting with a few lunar mansions who had formed a formation. Junior martial sister Meng's heart relaxed. However, in the next moment, she felt a great sense of danger. Out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly caught a glimpse of a flash of light not far away from her. Immediately after, she felt a chill run down her spine as the sound of a sword rang out. An unparalleled attack had already enveloped her body and mind. A sword cultivator. Junior martial sister Meng's beautiful face turned pale. She could never have imagined that such a powerful sword cultivator was hidden in this battlefield. She was only focused on guarding against Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi, so she did not notice the existence of this sword cultivator. At this moment, the other party took advantage of the moment her mind relaxed to launch a sudden attack. It could be said that the timing was extremely clever. Moreover, sword cultivators had always been unparalleled in killing. Being ambushed by a sword cultivator at this time, how could she have a good ending? The sword light rushed over, and in a hurry, Junior Marshal Sister Meng activated the power of her Dharma treasure and finally blocked the attack. However, in the next moment, she despaired because the other party's attacks were endless. There was more than one fierce and unparalleled sword light. There were several of them. The hastily activated Dharma treasure was broken, and the sword light swept past her body, rolling up a smear of blood. Junior Marshal Sister Meng's figure flew into the distance like a kite with a broken string. As she tumbled, she finally caught sight of the sword cultivator who had ambushed her. The figure that appeared in front of her eyes left her incomparably stunned. That was because that person looked exactly like Lu Yi. Junior Marshal Sister Meng was somewhat confused. She had clearly been on guard against Lu Yi, so how could another Lu Yi appear here? However, she quickly understood that this sword cultivator was not Lu Yi. It was just that he looked exactly like Lu Yi. So this Yu Yao of the Three-World Island was a twin? Lu Yi was naturally not a twin. The sword cultivator was just his talent tree clone. Earlier in the battle in front of the Array Foundation Hall, Lu Yi had borrowed the cover of Ma Shangxi's Sea of Blood to condense his sword cultivator clone. The talent tree clone was different from the precious blood clone. The talent tree clone could activate the power of the talent tree, so it could naturally restrain its aura and conceal its body. If it had been any other situation, Junior Marshal Sister Meng might have been able to detect it. She was also very strong. However, in such a chaotic battle, it was too easy for the talent tree clone to hide. The clone had not made a move all this time because he wanted to catch Junior Marshal Sister Meng off guard. He had been lying in wait for this opportunity, and sure enough, he had caught Junior Marshal Sister Meng off guard. Chapter 1739. Lu Ye's attainments in the Tao of sword cultivation were not high. His foundation in the Tao of sword cultivation was completely based on the Soaring Dragon Realm's Tao of sword importation. However, the Soaring Dragon Realm sword cultivators were actually not that strong. Hence, these inheritances were not very useful to Lu Yi now. They were not enough to support him in the battle against Yu Yao. However, if he supplemented it with a treasure, the situation would be different. The sword gourd. This was the heavenly supreme treasure, the Vine of Fortune. Its characteristics were somewhat similar to the Minor Constellation Hall. However, the Minor Constellation Hall could not be used for battle. The sword gourd, on the other hand, was a pure killing treasure. It did not have any killing power, but the sword chi contained within it did. Furthermore, it could devour treasures of different quality, and the might of the sword chi would be greatly different. The sword chi that Lu Yi used on Junior Sister Meng this time was no ordinary sword chi. It was the sword chi that was formed after the sword gourd devoured treasures. He had killed a few Yu Yao before. The treasures that Yu Yao left behind after her death had all been stuffed into the sword gourd. The sword chi that was formed after the sword gourd devoured treasures, coupled with his powerful foundation, was not to be underestimated, even if it was not as powerful as the sword drawing slash. Junior Sister Meng could deal with 1 or 2 sword chi in a hurry, but it would be difficult for her to block 5 or 6 sword chi. The might of the protective treasure shattered. The savage sword chi pierced through her body, instantly severely injuring her. As her body fell, Junior Sister Meng took a deep breath and struggled to escape. However, a figure flashed in front of her. Lu Yi, wielding the mountain saber, had already appeared in front of her and blocked her path. He stared at her expressionlessly. Junior Sister Meng opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something. However, what greeted her was a merciless slash. If a snake was not killed, there would be trouble in the future. How could Lu Yi not understand this principle? Moreover, the battle between the two islands was not over yet. At this time, the death of any Yu Yao would increase their chances of victory. Blood spurted out. Junior Sister Meng's body fell downwards. Her vitality dissipated in midair. With Yu Yao dead, how could the constellations here still have the will to fight? They all scattered and fled in all directions, rushing towards a certain direction of Baiyue Island. Ma Shangxi led the constellations of the three realms in hot pursuit, continuing to expand the battle results. It was unknown how many cultivators of the three realms had lost their lives while fleeing. At the same time, 100 people rushed out from each of the 4 intact array foundation halls on the island. These people had been arranged by Yu Huan to maintain the island's protective array. Now that the island guarding grand array had been broken, they naturally had no place to use their skills. So, they were ready to leave this place after Yu Huan gave the order just now. In one of the halls, the 100 lunar mansions had just rushed out, but before they could recover, 4 figures suddenly appeared in 4 different directions, instantly forming a 4 symbols killing formation that enveloped the 100 lunar mansions. The 4 figures were exactly the same, all with the same appearance and aura as Lu Yi. It was Lu Ye's precious blood clone. One of the 5 drops of precious blood had exploded earlier, so only 4 drops were left. When Lu Yi condensed his talent tree clone, he also condensed these 4 precious blood clones and quietly hid here, waiting for prey. For this reason, Lu Yi specially used the power of his main body to enhance the clones with concealment and aura-concealing spirit runes. The 4 clones were equivalent to 4 Lu Yes. Although the clones could not use the methods of the main body in some aspects, once the 4 symbols killing formation was activated, the fate of these 100 lunar mansions was already decided. Taking advantage of their panic, the 4 clones had already begun to kill. One reason why Lu Yi did not join forces with Ma Shangxi to fight junior martial sister Meng was that he had fewer lunar mansions on his side, so he had to help share the pressure. The second reason was that all his clones had been mobilized. It was fine for him to deal with the lunar mansions, but he did not have enough strength to deal with Yu Yao. If he could not kill junior martial sister Meng, the pressure on his lunar mansions would also be great. On the other side, under the shocked exclamations of countless cultivators watching the battle, He Baichuan's troops drove straight into Baiyue Island. Some of the Baiyue cultivators who did not have time to retreat immediately suffered great misfortune. He Baichuan's troops had not killed any enemies. Now that they had entered the island, the 500 lunar mansions swarmed up as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They swept through the enemies along the way, leaving no survivors. After a while, Luan Xiaoa and Yen Miao led their lunar mansions to meet up with He Baichuan. Their 2 troops had experienced a crisis before, especially Yen Miao's troops, whose formation base hall's protection was almost broken. At that time, once the formation base hall's protection was broken, with their overall strength, there would definitely be many casualties. After all, the ones attacking them were Baiyue cultivators personally led by Yu Huan, and they outnumbered them by 3 to 1. Fortunately, Baiyue Island's protective formation was broken quickly enough. After He Baichuan led his troops in, Yu Huan knew that things were out of control. If he did not leave and He Baichuan came back, Yen Miao would voluntarily give up on defense. With a pincer attack, the situation would be completely reversed. Therefore, when the island's protective formation was broken and He Baichuan's troops charged in, Yu Huan decisively led his troops to retreat. The situation on Luan Xiaoa's side was similar. The 3 troops merged into one. After waiting for a while, Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi also rushed over. The forces of the 3-realm island were gathered in one place. Lu Yi turned his head to take a look. He discovered that apart from some of his lunar mansions who were injured, the others were basically unharmed. This was to be expected. Putting aside the 500 constellations under He Baichuan's command for now, they had never fought with the enemy before they entered the island. They had only been attacking each other from a distance of 200 li, so naturally, there would not be any casualties. Luan Xiaoa and Yen Miao's troops were both defending the formation base hall. As long as the formation base hall's protection was not broken, there would not be any casualties on their side. Only Lu Yi personally led over 100 people. First, they destroyed Su Yuming and his 300 lunar mansions. Then they fought with Junior Meng for a while. It was inevitable that cultivators would be injured. Fortunately, no one died. The outcome of such a battle was extremely shocking. In the past, in the battle for the spiritual island in the Vientiane Sea, even the victorious side would suffer many casualties. This result was due to the resilience of the Three Realm Islands cultivators. Secondly, Lu Ye's deployment was good enough. Otherwise, in just 5 minutes, Yen Miao's formation base hall's protection would be broken, and they would suffer heavy casualties. At this point in the battle, the Three Realm Island had undoubtedly taken the first step towards victory. However, the battle was not over. At the front of the Three Realms cultivators, Lu Yi turned his head and looked towards the center of the spiritual island. He sensed that all the Baiyue cultivators who were still alive were gathered there. If he was not wrong, that should be the center of the Baiyue Island. There must be many formations protecting that place. Previously, Yu Huan's spiritual will fluctuated as he ordered the Baiyue cultivators to retreat to the center of the island. He clearly did not intend to give up on Baiyue Island. He was prepared to rely on the arrangements there to resist. Rest for a while. We will attack in 2 hours. Baiyue Island is ours for sure. With Lu Ye's order, the cultivators of the Three Realm rested and recuperated. In this battle, even medical cultivators like Hua Xi and Shui Yuan were present. It could be said that all the living people of the Three Realm Island, except for Yaya, who was left behind by Lu Yi in the Mermaid Territory, were here. With the help of medical cultivators, the cultivators' injuries were naturally not a problem. Only a few seriously injured people could not recover their combat strength in a short time. However, it was not a big deal. The chaotic Baiyue Island temporarily calmed down. There were many cultivators watching the battle from the periphery. Some were happily watching the show, some were whispering to each other, and some were reviewing the situation with serious expressions. It was rare to see a battle on a high-class spiritual island. Naturally, the Yu Yao cultivators who came to watch the battle were not just here to watch the show. They wanted to see something from this battle so that they could adjust the arrangements of their spiritual islands. For example, if they were on the offensive side, what should they do to achieve such a result? Or if they were on the defensive side, what should they do to avoid such an awkward situation? The battle for Baiyue Island was a battle between the Three Realm Island and the Baiyue Island. However, those who were observant could see something useful from this battle. The people of the Three Realm Island are resting. From the looks of it, they want to completely take over Baiyue Island? Of course. They have already fought their way into the island. How can they give up halfway? Brother Wu, do you think the Three Realm Island can succeed this time? It will be difficult. Brother Wu shook his head slowly. Although the protective array of Baiyue Island has been broken and many cultivators have died, I think they still have the strength to fight. There are more than 1,200 people gathered at the central area. They have more people than the Three Realm Island. The person who asked the question smiled slightly. What about the 2,000 people of Baiyue Island? In just a short while, 800 of them have been killed. What can the remaining 1,200 people do? Moreover, a few of their Yu Yao have died. It seems like only Yu Huan and Jiang Yan are left. Brother Wu shook his head and said, the reason why the Three Realm Island could achieve such a great result is purely because Yu Huan is useless. Previously, the people of Baiyue Island were too scattered. This gave the Three Realm Island a chance to take them down one by one. Fortunately, he is not a fool. Now that he has realized that the situation is not good, he regrouped and defended the central area. Even if there are only 2 Yu Yao left, it will not be that easy for the Three Realm Island to take them down. The person who asked the question pondered for a moment. Then he nodded slightly. That makes sense. 1,200 lunar mansions and 2 Yu Yao. This kind of force was not weak. Moreover, they had the support of many formations at the central area. If the Three Realm Island attacked forcefully, they would not be able to take them down without paying a huge price. He asked again, if it was you, Brother Wu, what would you do? Brother Wu smiled slightly. If it were me, of course, I would stop while I was ahead. Immediately withdraw? Brother Wu said, naturally, I would not withdraw so easily. After fighting so hard for so long and gaining such a great advantage, why would I withdraw? Naturally, I would attack with all my strength and force Yu Huan to negotiate. The person who asked the question was enlightened. So you want to get some benefits? It is not just some benefits. Brother Wu's expression was solemn. The cultivators of Baiyue Island have occupied this place for 800 years. They have accumulated a lot of resources. As long as the three-realm island dares to make a price, they will definitely return with a full harvest. I believe that Yu Huan is not stupid. He will not insist on fighting to the death with the three-realm island. After living for so many years, he should understand this principle. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.